Committing the salute to the flag, I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and I would ask you to note that the meeting is being electronically recorded. We have a lengthy agenda tonight, and it will begin with open forum. If there are any members of the community who would like to address the school committee at this time, now would be the time to do so. And there are seeing none, I will close the open forum, and we will move on to the approval of minutes. We have minutes which were included in the school committee packets from July 16th, 2015, which was the first session of the finalist interview for the position of superintendent, and our last regularly scheduled meeting, which was two weeks ago tonight, on September 14th. Are there any comments or questions with regard to the draft minutes?
Motion to accept as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Those minutes are approved. And our the first agenda item tonight is our regular briefing on behalf of the Attleboro Municipal Council. And so we're joined tonight by City Council President Frank Cook, who had asked to come join the committee. And Mr. Cook had asked me in our last conversation if there are any specific items or areas of concern that I expected the school committee would want to bring to his attention, and I first invited him to present any issues that he thought may be of interest to us. That was certainly one of the important parts of the reciprocal briefing schedule that was established between the school committee and the city council, and I also assured him that this being the enthusiastic and active school committee that we are, that there will be questions and comments for him to make sure that Mr. Cook does not feel as though he's came and felt lonely. So, Mr. Cook, again, thank you for being here, and thank you for the robust efforts that you have made on behalf of your colleagues to keep the lines of dialogue and communication open between the municipal government and the school committee. And so I'd like to give you the floor to see if there are any information specific that you'd like to bring to the committee's attention.
Okay, thank you. And again, to Chairman Murphy, members of the school committee, and members of the administration, I just want to thank you again for this opportunity, and again, your willingness to have our two legislative bodies in the city meet and exchange information regularly. Chairman Murphy was before the City Council several weeks ago, giving us an update, and this is something I was supposed to appear back in August, but on that particular day there were a lot of events in the city, unfortunately, one of which was my own daughter had to have emergency surgery that day, so I spent the balance of the day at Stewart Hospital, so I could not be here, so my apologies for that. There have been a number of exciting things happening at the council level. One, which is both, I would say it's bittersweet, is the retirement of Linda Alger, our administrative assistant. She's worked for the city for 30 years, and Wednesday is her final day with us. And last Friday night, we actually had a surprise farewell party for her. Mr. Murphy was among those in attendance, and it was a surprise to Linda over at the Elks Club, and a number of former councils, a lot of people who've known and worked with Linda through the years, were in attendance. And she is, I feel like my right arm is being cut off, because as the council president works very closely not only with our admin person, who's our only full-time person actually who works for the council, but also with the with the city clerk. And the three of us, on the days of meetings in particular, and other times regularly, touching base with each other about what's going on. And Linda has such a wealth of experience, a wealth of institutional knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge walking out the door with her on Wednesday afternoon. However, she is going to stay involved in some way, shape, or form. And I know of one future item that she's going to be working with, which is very exciting. We have hired a replacement during the summer. We interviewed it. There were a number of applicants, so it was narrowed down to a smaller field, and we have selected Kenneth Owens. Kenneth has actually been being trained by Linda in recent weeks. He will be the go-to person come October 1st, Thursday, and he brings a wealth of experience. He's been an Attleboro resident for a number of years, and he has a tremendous amount of experience working at the state level with various committees, various state organizations, state senators, and so forth. Came highly regarded, and he began the training back shortly after Labor Day, and Thursday he'll be going it on his own. So if you're over at City Hall, you want to drop in, as I said, he's our only full-time employee, so he's there all the time. A couple of things that have been going on at the city has been, among them, we are in the process of developing a new ordinance for the city relative to a lot of the development that's been going on downtown. This is something that the late chair of the ARA, Judy Robbins, was working on, and we had actually had arranged for her and the ARA to come in for a regular update before the council. It was among the last things that I had worked with her before her untimely passing. But one of the things that she had in the last meeting, just days before she passed away, was communication with members of the council who were at that meeting, in particular our ordinance committee chairman, Jeremy Denley, about a transit-oriented development ordinance. And what that is, and I'm going to, rather than try to give it to you from memory, I'm just going to read that part of the ordinance. The proposed ordinance runs about 12 pages, by the way, very detailed. But the purpose of the transit-oriented development, also known as TOD, zoning district, is to create and promote a blend of compact and very highly intensive residential, retail, office, civic entertainment, and institutional uses, and to create and promote the retention of uses in areas with high potential for enhanced mass transit and pedestrian activity with less reliance on the automobile. Pedestrian circulation and transit access are especially important and have an increased emphasis in the TOD zoning district. The development standards are designed to require compact urban growth, opportunities for increased choice of transportation modes, and a safe and pleasant pedestrian environment by encouraging an attractive streetscape, a functional mix of complementary uses, and the provision of facilities that support transit use, bicycling, and walking. We had a public hearing on this matter a couple of weeks ago, and tomorrow night actually is the fifth Tuesday of the month. Council normally does not meet on the fifth Tuesday of the night. In a way, it was kind of providential that we had the fifth Tuesday in timing with this, because at 5:30 in the annex off of the council chambers, the council, led by our ordinance chairman Jeremy Denley, and all members of the city council have been invited beside its committee. We are going to be having a working session with the planning board, to whom we've had a joint public hearing with, members of the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority, the zoning board chairman Keith Hutchins has told me that he will be there. I believe Gary Arazian, who's our planning and director, will be there, or members from his office. I'm not sure if the city solicitor, Bob Mangiarotti, will be there, but he has reviewed this very lengthy and very detailed document. And our aim is to resolve any outstanding issues, particularly those in which there were different opinions. And among those, for example, are if you've ever looked at Chapter 17 of the zoning, of the ordinances, that deals with zoning. There's a lot of things in there that have all these letters, P, N, D, S, and it all stands for whether they're permitted, not permitted, or you need a special permit. And there are some disagreements over some of the classifications in terms of, for example, whether or not hospital-related services should be allowed by right, for example, or a one-person doctor office, or things of that nature. I would say that it appeared to me when we had the public hearing that there was general agreement about the need for this particular type of zoning district. This will be in the downtown area, down where the intermodal transportation center is. There's a lot of development that's going to be planned where the current DPW garage is located. So this is going to be primarily down in that area. So again, tomorrow night, all these bodies are going to be meeting together. Meeting's been posted.
Sounds
It's
like
open.
we're the only public body not invited.
Probably.
I mean,
Actually, it's open to
we are looking
just
for
about.
something to do tomorrow night. Mr.
So if you're
Murphy.
free and would like to come down, to see what's going on with this, it would be, it's going to be at 5:30. And again, these boards that are going to be working together, just trying to really, and again, there is general agreement. It's only on some fine points, really, that there is an outstanding issue. I'm hopeful that perhaps tomorrow night we'll be able to resolve a lot of these these differences that we have. And again, they tend to be more philosophical than technical. After that meeting is over, the council has to wait for the planning board to make a recommendation. It's not a binding recommendation to the council, but they have to make a recommendation to the municipal council. at which time I'll refer it back to the recommendation to the ordinance committee, and they will subsequently meet and review any comments that the planning board may have. And then when they're satisfied, they'll vote it out of committee. The subcommittee is composed of 3 people. They'll vote it out to bring it before the full council for a vote. Now, when that's going to happen, I'm really not sure, but it would appear to me that this is something that will be, I expect that will be completed sometime in the, probably late October, probably more likely early November. This will also serve, by the way, for would-be developers as a planning document, because it does get into, near the end of this, some guidelines for people who are actually going to be developing in terms of the minimum lot area, the minimum building height, things of that nature, right on down the line. So it does look like a very exciting thing, because of some of the things that can actually go into this area. And it does have the potential of really bringing a lot of foot traffic downtown, a lot of people moving in that'll be able to access the bus, the trains, bicycling, as I mentioned. The DPW garage that's in that area, it'll probably be probably early next spring, I would imagine, sometime after the winter anyways, that area will be cleared. There is ongoing remedial work going on down there currently. But this looks like a very exciting project and zoning area or zoning district for the future. Also, this past Tuesday, a week ago, we actually had the redevelopment authority come in before the council. They came in during the Capital Improvement and City Development Committee, which is chaired by Richard Conti. He was the one who is not only the chair of that committee, but he also serves in that capacity, he also serves as the council's liaison with the redevelopment authority. Several years back, when I was the then finance committee, it's now budget committee chair, as we were starting to see a lot of we were working on the urban renewal plan, some of these other projects that were going on, it seemed to me that we needed to have open communications between the ARA and the council to try to keep us on track with each other. And the purpose, so at that time, I basically had created or had advocated for and subsequently created, and I was the very first liaison between the council and the ARA. And the purpose, very similar to what Chairman Murphy and I were trying to do in this term, really was to maintain communication. So we can keep in touch with each other if there's problems, if there are issues, having that face-to-face so you know who the various players are can come in very handy. So this past Tuesday night, the ARA came in for their update. As I mentioned, this was had been set up actually the end of July with Judy Robbins, and the ARA in the days immediately following, I was in touch with them, asking them, "Do you still plan to come in on the 22nd?" And they were absolutely coming in. So when they came in the other night, they actually gave us an update on all the various projects that are going on. Rick Creer is now the person who is heading up the ARA, with Benny Keene as the vice chair, and he was a former city councilor. And then Jay DeLisio, who is a former city councilor, serves as the secretary on that board at the moment. So they were able to give us an update on all the various projects, some of which have subsequently been written up in the newspaper. Perhaps the most exciting of all is the future sports complex being put down in the IBP area off of County Street. This sports village complex, they have started clearing the ground. If you've been down by there, they're actually beginning a lot of the work on it at this particular time. And at this time, with what's been proposed, when it is finished, it is going to be one of the largest, not in the state, not in New England, but one of the largest sports complexes of that type in the nation. So there's a tremendous amount of possibilities, for the future of that project. And the first phase is going to be dealing with a skating rink, in particular, and some other auxiliary buildings and so forth. And if it's on track, and they're hoping to be able to open that next fall, actually. So that's something that is really, I think we're all very excited about that in terms of what it can mean for the city, in terms of jobs, in terms of opportunities, in terms of bringing people into the city. The Ponton Hewitt complex, which I'm sure you've all been at, maybe you've had children, played at it, you played at it, walked around the track. That is something that still gets rave reviews. Senator Jim Timilty, for example, I regularly hear from him, and he's mentioned about, boy, I wish we had something of this caliber in my own community. But just in terms of the reaction to that particular that facility, and even from other out-of-town groups that use it, has been very, very positive. And I think we'll see the same thing with the sports complex. Let's see, a couple of other things that are coming up on our schedule. On Tuesday, October 6th, we'll be having the tax classification hearing. It's going to begin on that night. This is an annual process that the council has to go through relative to setting the tax rate. So at that time, the city assessor, Stan Nazareth, will come in to present information. A few years ago, actually 2 years ago, the mayor had put together an ad hoc committee of people composed of residents, composed of business people in the city, residents, to really look at our tax structure and trying to figure out, what is the fairest way, and even going forward in terms of how we set the tax classification. Because sometimes it just seemed that there really didn't seem to be a consistent approach to it. In other words, sometimes it would be like, the businesses would get a break, and then, maybe the next year the residents would get a break. But it needed a more concrete approach, something more definitive that could really serve to guide us going forward. I think Mr. Larson serves on that committee, if I remember correctly, among others. And, the work that you and that committee did serves exactly what I hoped it would be. Instead of just a one-year shot in the dark, so to speak, it would serve as a planning document that would guide us going forward, in terms of not only planning us, but also be flexible enough to make adjustments depending upon how the various segments of the economy are growing, in terms of are there more houses being built, is the businesses coming in, whatever the case would be. And so far, it appears to be working that way. So there will be a hearing on that. Then subsequently, we will be setting, the tax rate. And I've had conversations with Mr. Nazareth. I've also talked briefly with Brian Kirby, but, we're not talking numbers yet at this point. So that public hearing is going to begin at 7 o'clock next Tuesday. And depending upon the information that's provided, we may be continuing it, for another couple of weeks after that. Let's see, one of the other things that I'm sure you're probably aware of is that in the mayor's communication of the 15th, one of his items, actually is the last item on the communication, was to request the council to approve a loan order for $1,200,000 for the purpose of paying costs of a feasibility study to, one, understand the extent of deficiencies identified in the statement of interest submitted to the Mass School Building Authority, MSBA, as well as other infrastructure deficiencies which may exist at Attleboro High School. Second, to begin to explore the formulation of a solution to those deficiencies. 3, to perform a space utilization assessment and an academic program needs analysis. And 4, to begin to explore the formulation of a solution to any deficiencies discovered through such assessment and analysis. And this is something I think very exciting, for both of our boards as well as the entire city. And I think it underscores the importance of maintaining that communication between our two boards, because it's something going forward. We're going to be working very closely, not just over the next 3 months, but into the next term. All of the, I should add that all of the councilors did have received a copy of this document, which is about 9 pages long, the initial compliance certification that was submitted back in, it was signed actually by the mayor, by the superintendent, and by the chair of the school committee back at the end of January of this past year. This just spells out various aspects connected with the project itself. Because this is a request for a loan order, we are required to have a public hearing, and that public hearing will be next Tuesday night, the 6th. So we are looking for input from the public, and again, you're as with all our public hearings, all our meetings, you're certainly always welcome to attend. I have also referred this matter to the planning board for study and recommendation, because one of the responsibilities of the planning board is whenever we get a loan order on anything, schools, buying fire trucks, whatever it happens to be, whenever we get a loan order, we have to get a recommendation from the planning board. And this is something that they will do at one of their own meetings. They do not have to have a public hearing. They discuss it. And the major thing is they're trying to see is this in compliance with the comprehensive plan for the city? And then they give us a recommendation on this. After we have their recommendation and after the public hearing is closed, then subsequently this will be referred to back to the budget committee, again chaired by Brian Kirby. And then it will be, at that time, very similar to what's going on with the transit-oriented development. The budget committee will meet, discuss it, and then they will vote it out of committee to be voted on by the full council. I'm not sure what dates those things will happen, because again, we haven't even had the public hearing yet. And again, all of our, from an organizational point of view, the council has 10 standing committees, all of which consist of 3 members, of which 1 member serves as the chair of the committee, 1 serves as the vice chair, third one is the member. You need 2 out of the 3 people to vote on any matters to bring them before the full council. If one of the 3 members is not there, then as council president, I am the ex officio of all committees, and then I would step in as that third person. Or if there's only 1 or 2 people out, I become the second person. If I'm not there, the vice president, currently Peter Blair, would step and become that third member. But this is something I would imagine that all 3 members of the committee will be there. They'll talk about it, and they will then subsequently be bringing that forward for a full vote by the full council. So that is, I think, something very exciting for the city. We all know the needs of the high school, especially we who deal with school matters on a daily basis in some cases, and beyond that, deal with it on a very regular basis here. So again, this is I think these are very exciting times for the city, and both for the council and the school committee as we're looking at some of these items that that are going on. So those are some of the things that those are probably the key things that are happening right now before the council. And as I said, it's going to be a busy fall. But again, I'm personally very encouraged and very excited. For a long time in the city, there were, we had some difficult days, as we all know, periodically. And yet, when you look at some of the projects, you talk about Blue Pride. I think that there's a spirit of can-do, alive and well in the city, and being able to manage a lot of these projects, being able to make sure that we do it in a financially prudent manner, is part of our key to our future success.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
So thank you.
No, thank you, and thank you as always for being here and for the thorough briefing as to the matters that are before the municipal council or will in due time be coming before the municipal council. I want to open the floor to questions and comments from the school committee. I suspect that to some degree one of the messages you'll be leaving here tonight is how imperative the school committee feels the potential impact of the MSBA AHS initiative is. We say almost on a weekly basis, and we embrace the reality on a daily basis that the scope of the MSBA project has not yet been determined. But given that it is the most critical infrastructure issue facing the school system and, frankly, the city, the fact that we are starting to make progress and take steps in the direction of determining what Attleboro High School will need to look like and how it will need to operate in the years ahead is certainly a very important step. I will just say, I have a few substantive comments myself, and this is a substantive comment as well, but it was an honor to represent the school committee at Mrs. Alger's retirement party on Friday. It was a really good example of the community coming together to honor an individual who really is in and of itself an institution and has done so much for the municipal government and the municipality over the course of several decades. I was writing out the card on behalf of the committee, and I almost said that working with her on scheduling matters and other procedural items was my favorite part of dealing with the city council, but I thought that might be misconstrued, and so I decided not to include that, but did feel like it was a good enough line to mention here. So any questions or comments for President Cook? Mr. Larson.
I don't know if we've shared, or if the administration has shared with you the timetable, and maybe Mr. Furtado could enlighten all of us. Do we know when the loan order has to be approved by the city in order to stay on MSBA's schedule?
Yeah, the MSBA has to have received a certified vote from the city by October 26th.
Okay.
And the mayor and Mr. Lacasse are aware
Yes.
of
Right.
that, something that, but it's certainly a very valid point, and one that we should all be aware of, because this is the 60% reimbursement comes with some strings, as it should, and
Right.
that's certainly one of them, that we have an urgency to this.
Well, my concern is I know there's a lot of steps that all have to happen, and I just want to make sure that we're giving you the information that you need in order to help the process.
Appreciate that. I anticipate, given the nature of this particular public hearing next week, that the public hearing would be closed following the meeting, following the hearing, rather. Again, just based on the nature of it and from past experience with similar types of things, in which case it would then be referred back to the budget committee, and then they would be, I'm sure they would be taking up the following week, the 13th. Again, we need to get a recommendation from the planning board. I'm not sure. I would imagine we would probably get that. Again, they got it 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure when their next meeting is, but if they provide that to us, for example, next week, and we close the public hearing, potentially, I think I could see the council potentially voting on this on the full council on October the 20th. Again, our regular meetings are the 1st and 3rd. However, both the mayor and I have the authority, as well as a certain number of councilors, could call for a special meeting, if necessary. And we have done that, meeting at different times. Even on one occasion, during I think it was my first term, we actually had a meeting on a Friday night. The only time I've ever remember a meeting on a Friday night. And that was in order to, and it was relative to being able to purchase what is now Engine 5, the Attleboro Fire Department, which was at the Olympics in Salt Lake City, actually. And we had the opportunity to actually be able to get that piece of equipment. So
So if your house is burning and Engine 5 pulls up, you should be grateful that government
right.
workers are willing
And
to
that's
come in
what
on Friday.
definitely the flags on the
So-
side. It was part of the equipment that was doing protection, providing emergency response capability at the Salt Lake Olympics, actually,
Thank
years
you.
ago.
If you could share the timetable with the rest of the people
I will do
involved,
that.
I'd appreciate it.
All right, I'm sure that, as I said, I know that there is, even before this came down, I'm in regular communication, with the mayor, obviously, on various matters, and I know that there was, that this is a topic, that I've been aware of, for several weeks, way before it came down. I know there's a meeting several weeks back, as a matter of fact, regarding this, which I could not make, but in which this was, but I was briefed on what was going on with it.
As long as everyone is in, the lines of communication can never close, I think that's a
Right.
important reminder. Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you, President Cook, for appearing for us tonight. First of all, a couple comments. Actually, I wish Linda a long and happy retirement. She will definitely be missed.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And best of luck on the DPW highway yard. Those guys deserve it. They do a great job.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of them individually, and they do deserve a new building. I think this other comment, I don't want you to take it wrong, but
Okay.
in FY15, for the first time since I can remember being on this committee, we had a transportation surplus, and it didn't seem like that surplus, that hard work was recognized, that the school committee, with their policies, procedures, and the administration did to come up with that surplus. And the years preceding that, the city council kind of just threw us under the bus every year about why are you over, why you keep coming back to us for money. So, Frank, I would just say that I would like to see a little bit of gratitude by the city council and recognizing the hard work of this committee and of the administration in, putting this under the spotlight and doing the best job that we could with it. And I haven't seen that, and that's a little disturbing to me. I wish, there would be a little bit of kudos given out, whether they're well-deserved. And that's just a comment, I'm not trying to,
That's fine.
but it's just been, it bugs me. It's been years and years since we got this right, or in the right place. And I just would like to see that appreciated by the council.
If I may respond, I appreciate that type of feedback, and again, this is part of the reason why we're doing this, in terms of, trying to be in regular communication with each other, because I think it's human tendency, to point out faults, and yet we tend to sometimes be a little bit slow in praising, when, it's almost like, well, we expect it to be that way, but I see where you're coming from, and I will, and again, personally along that line, I will share that, with my colleagues. I know that there was, you're absolutely right, there was a lot of concern about this issue in the past. And, I can personally say that I thought I had a recent memo I had about that with me, but I thought I had it with me when I left the house, but I don't see it here, so maybe at the last moment, maybe I dropped it, I left it in my car, or dropped it on the way in. But, I will personally, convey to you, my appreciation, for that. And again, I know the work that's been done. I know it's very difficult. I know it's very frustrating for all parties, concerned. But I'm a firm believer in, on a personal level, of living within your means. And it gets a lot trickier when we're dealing with, issues like this that are, especially a moving target, like on the homeless, situation. I totally understand that. And, again, to try to be able to, it's almost like that old, ad or comment about trying to corral cats or something, because it's a moving target. But again, your point's well taken, and I will share this with my colleagues. And again, I appreciate getting feedback like that, because it enables me to maintain where our communication lines are working well.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to cut you off, I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't either.
I truly do appreciate that, Frank. I think my last question would be, there seems to be a lot of building going on in the city of Attleboro, DPW garage, and there's something going on at the wastewater. Has there been a certain amount of money taken off the books of the city, of old grants or loans or whatever, where there seems to be an avenue to get these things done?
Yeah, in some cases, there's been a certain amount of debt that has come off, which has enabled us to be, working some of these, these other projects, especially the water project, if I remember correctly. So, so again, there has been, the interesting thing, we've been able to do some of these without really, really mortgaging the future, big time, and without, when you look at some of these we've been able to do, it's really come down to a lot of prudent financial management, that we've been able to do a lot of these things without having to, for example, go through the process of trying to get an override, for example. So it's been some things have been coming off, which have helped us. We've been able to get some decent rates also for some of the borrowing we've done, because, our bond rating is much improved over some of the things that we have done. For example, when I was the finance chair, one of the things that I was advocating for, that in our outgoing treasurer, Ethel Sandbach, had initially put me onto this, was the importance of having both a healthy stabilization fund, but also to have like a in a regular plan to put money in and build up that fund, because this is something that the loan people look at, or the bond people look at. And when you go to apply for a loan, that's a big part of it. Another part of it was also to have a debt plan, that you would be watching the amount of debt you build up. And these two, those are both items that I brought in under new business when I was the finance chair, was that the city established a debt plan, and also this plan to build up that stabilization fund, with regular expenditure, so that when you're going to run into, difficult times, periodically. I mean, if you go back and look through history, it's up and down. In fact, even as a history major, I remember learning about how, back in biblical times, for example, that there would be, there was always an admonition, to local governments that, during those 7 prosperous years to set money aside, because you're going to go through like 7 lean years. And, again, if you look back through history, you will see that roller coaster. And you really need to plan for those down times when things are going well, and being able to, manage everything very, 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 very effectively. It's not an easy job to do. A lot of areas right now are very tight, where some departments are very, very, some are shorthanded.
We're one of them.
I know you are, you know, exactly. We're well familiar with that, so, it is a balancing act. But again, part of it has been prudent management, some things coming off of the debt that have helped us also, But I think it's a tribute to, everybody involved, not only elected officials, but appointed officials who are, and city workers who are involved with this, that we've been able to do so many things in recent years, without having to, go to an override, to make ends meet, for example, and not having to, tap into your stabilization fund to fund ongoing expenses, because you look around some area communities, I personally think that's why they got into some trouble. They started funding ongoing expenses, with those types of funds. It's going to catch up with you eventually. That's a very brief thumbnail of it.
And I thank you, President Cook.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Cook? I just a couple of quick notes that I wanted to make sure that I did communicate, more sort of on thematic notes as opposed to specific areas of concern. But there's you'll note that our second agenda item tonight is a request that was informally brought to the school committee with regard to the use of Coelho Middle School on Election Day this year as the Ward 1 polling place. We discussed this briefly on September 14th, and I've been in contact with our central office administrators who have been in contact with our building administrators at Coelho, and it is the recommendation of our administration that we approve that use because it's this school committee and or the school department really do want to seek out opportunities for the school system to be a contributive constituent of the community. And we find ourselves apparently in a place where the long-standing Ward 1 polling place is no longer available. And the city informally brought that request to the committee. I know that that item was also in the mayor's September
Yes.
15th communication. It's been referred to a committee. And I did want to just take this opportunity to make the point that under state law, the custody of the school facilities, it rests with the school committee. And it's not a matter, it's certainly obviously the municipal council to decide where the polling place is going to be. But I think when we see that type of opportunity, because this is an area that we've discussed just recently from a curriculum standpoint, that state law does place certain elements of authority with the governing body of the school system. And there's a reason for that. The school committee works closely with the school administrators who have the best judgment with regard to what potentially could disrupt the educational process and programming for students on any given day. And so I think it is important to note that the ultimate authority to use those facilities, be it during the school day or, frankly, because we've got education being delivered 7 days a week, hopefully 24 hours a day, that the school committee's prerogative with regard to use of building and facilities be maintained. And so, again, perfectly understandable why the municipal council would need to take up the issue, because the school committee is certainly not going to vote on where the polling place should be. But when any use of school buildings or facilities is going to be considered, it is critical that request, ideally in a formal manner, come to the school committee.
May I
Sure, of
ask,
course.
that's something that you're going to be voting on?
We'll be voting on it today, and again, they're two very distinct questions that would
Right.
come before the municipal council and
Right.
before the school committee.
I'm aware of that.
And the point that I would just make is that it's important that that second question of is this a permissible use of the facility on that given day be made by the school committee, because again, it's the school committee that's in touch with the administrators who can determine whether or not it's disruptive to the educational process.
Right. I had toyed with mentioning that tonight, but I figured that, that you were, I knew you had a role in this, and
Sure.
I figured that you were involved. That matter did come down, and it was to approve the relocation of the Ward 1 polling location.
Right.
And that has been referred to the Ordinance, Elections, and Legislative Matters Committee, again chaired by Chairman Denley. And he'll be bringing that. I mean, obviously, part of the issue with this is the election's coming up in a little bit more than a month.
Yep.
And
There's an urgency.
one of the things, I've sat in on a number of the election committee meetings, especially when I was chairing the ordinance committee several years ago. And I sometimes think, we go in to vote, and you just kind of take it for granted it's going to be there. You walk in, you give them your name, they give you a ballot, you vote, then you're out the door. And yet there's a lot of work that goes into actually, and I never realized it until I sat in on some of these meetings years ago, with what goes on with that. And if you're changing a location, you have to notify all the voters, by mail, that they are now, in fact, I believe it has to be done by mail. So there's
Right.
an awful lot of
Yep.
work. But yeah, I knew that the school committee had ours is just to approve. It was basically to approve the relocation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that question was going to come up.
Yeah, and
I'll
I
share that with Chairman Denley, that
Sure.
your board was voting tonight, so that he's aware of it,
Yeah.
because I'm sure that'll come up.
I just think it is important for anything like this because, I mean, frankly, again, our administrators have looked into it and they're confident that from a logistical and security standpoint that this isn't an issue, and the school committee will ultimately make the decision what the committee will make.
Right.
But I think it shouldn't just be looked at as a pro forma step. That
I agree.
when the use of a school facility is going to be used, that decision does have to come
Right.
from the school committee. So I appreciate
Right.
your.
On a personal note, if I may
Sure.
add, a couple of years ago when I was teaching at, before they moved us, I was at Franklin High School.
Okay.
And Franklin High School, that was the polling place for the town of Franklin.
Sure.
And I actually found it, as a history government teacher, a very teachable moment.
Absolutely.
To be able to take my students down quietly so they could observe the process of what's involved in it and so forth. And again, I know this is it's not a high school where it's going to
Yep.
be going into.
No, but we teach
but,
civics at the middle
but-
school too, so we'll make sure they
Right.
get it.
But I can remember looking back when I was in school in what was then called junior high school, which is our middle school. One of my first experiences was on election day. The civics teacher taking us down to see the voting in process. It was one of my earliest memories of elections and government. So it's
We'll have to check with Mr. Bowles to see if he has any future city council presidents walking the halls at Coelho. So thank you for that. Another general municipal issue that is on our agenda tonight, and it was something that Mr. Furtado communicated to the Attleboro Police Department earlier today, and Chief Hegney was gracious enough to give me a few minutes on Friday to discuss with him, and I want to thank the chief and the entire municipal government for their the enthusiasm with which they respond when we bring issues of this nature to their attention. Is just with regard to general safety in terms of bus stops and the importance of making sure that all traffic regulations are being adhered to by Attleboro drivers and those visiting Attleboro during times where students are getting on and getting off the bus. There isn't, frankly, if there's a specific spot of concern, obviously the school department does communicate that to the public safety officials. We encourage parents to do the same if you're seeing drivers disregarding stop signs. But particularly at this time of year, I think it's always important that we just make note of that and make sure that drivers, we are doing everything we can to communicate to the members of the community the need to be cognizant of students both getting on and getting off the bus. And the final issue, which is, again, we've touched upon in a variety of ways tonight with regard to budgetary matters. President Cook is aware, as I know the entire municipal council is, that there was a significant discrepancy between the school committee's request for an operating budget in FY16 and the budget that was ultimately appropriated. We've talked many times about the structural deficiencies that are essentially imposed at the state level that to which that discrepancy is largely attributable. But I think it's one of the points that I've tried to communicate as clearly as I could when speaking before the municipal council, and frankly speaking to anyone else who will listen, is that some of that discrepancy also has to do with priorities, and that it is incumbent upon the school committee and the administrators who report to us to make sure that we are operating the district in a transparent manner that instills confidence in the use of taxpayer dollars, but it's also the responsibility of the school committee to zealously advocate for public education in the community and to make note when the financial realities that are being imposed are simply not sustainable, and that's has been a growing issue. There's been a significant discrepancy in the request and the appropriation for the past 3 fiscal years, and it's something that I think as a community and as a school committee we need to continue to talk about because we have a responsibility to the community to let them know that the current situation is not sustainable. And there was a point made at my last appearance before the council that some of our neighbors are dealing with what are considered even more drastic circumstances from a budgetary standpoint. And I think the point that I tried to make then, and again, I'll continue to try to make, is that this school committee feels a responsibility to communicate to the community before we get to that situation, and we are rapidly hurtling toward it. And so while we certainly understand that the structural problems are not created at the local level, that does not absolve the local officials from our responsibility to do everything we can to mitigate the consequences of those structural problems. And so, again, as we've discussed, sometimes I think it's important whenever we have these forums to keep that dialogue open. And I would just say also, final sort of preview from our agenda later tonight, one of the issues that's been taken up by the policy subcommittee of the school committee is an amendment to two of our budget policies governing our budget process. And there are a couple of sort of process changes that we've done, but one particularly substantive change that I think the community should know about, and certainly the municipal government should know about, is the policy subcommittee has endorsed a date of December 15th of the preceding fiscal year by which the school administration is responsible for articulating and communicating to the school committee and therefore the community a set of budgetary priorities for the coming fiscal year. We've talked several times now over the course of many budget cycles that the budget is a process that serves multiple purposes. It is to plan for the coming fiscal year, and from an operational standpoint, it's also to communicate to the community what are the priorities and what is the vision for the district, and frankly, what would that cost. Our process of trying to condense that into a 6-week period has never worked particularly well, and as these changed circumstances and increasingly difficult financial circumstances have sort of been imposed on us, it's important for us to extend that dialogue in a way where the budget process isn't just a politicized process that takes place during a 2-month period in the spring. It's something that as a community we embrace and have an understanding that we need to advocate for priorities, and ultimately they need to be addressed in order to serve the best interest of current and future students. So I think that is something that, again, we'll be discussing about later tonight. But I want to make sure that that you know, and that anyone else interested in the future of education in Attleboro knows that we are going to be advancing that dialogue such that we can effectively advocate for the needs of the students in the Attleboro school system.
I appreciate that, and I know that we've had discussions. And one of the things at the council level is, as you all know, but I find that I have to constantly say is that when it comes to the budget, we cannot add a penny. When we get the budget, we can make cuts, we can make recommendations, but we cannot add 1 penny, to the budget. And that's something that I think that many times people within the community may not necessarily understand that, especially when we're doing the budget at that time. I know I've had at times lengthy discussions, with other members who've served on this board along that line, trying to explain that. And again, at the council level, of course, when we get the budget, we're looking at all the departments, including obviously the school department, and it's always a balancing act, trying to figure out in terms of meeting all the needs across the board. And as I've so often said, the economic pie is only so big. Right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of different slices, and part of it sometimes is, trying to figure out how do you slice that up, because whenever you give one part a larger segment, it takes from something else all the way across the line. So it's always kind of a balance along in terms of how we end up doing this. And again, I mean, I can't tell you, I know the importance of the schools. I mean, I am a teacher. I work in this. I'm familiar from that point of view the challenges that you all face. But I also know the challenges, and I hear from all the various departments within the city regarding their particular needs and so forth. So it's always a balance, trying to figure out how do we go about doing this. And again, going forward, I think it's something that like other communities, we're all going to be wrestling with this.
Yeah.
Because people, we know that people move into a community and the schools are a draw, but also the fact that it's safe. And that other facilities and needs are going to be there. I've had conversations with some people in this community who have advocated that we close the rec department, we close the council on aging, we close the library, we close the zoo, et cetera, and put all that money towards the schools, for example. But again, in terms of the type of community we want, it all comes down to like what type of community do we want to have. You know,
Yeah.
and it has to be one in which people are being educated, people feel safe,
Yep.
and other needs being met all the way down the line, you know?
Yeah, and
So it's difficult.
I think what's important is because this body obviously deals exclusively with one component of the
Right.
city's public policy challenges. But I think the message that we've tried to communicate throughout the budget process and throughout our strategic planning process and throughout our superintendent selection process and throughout our day-to-day operations is that we believe that the path toward a better quality of life and a better enjoyment of services across the board in a community like Attleboro is through a continuously improving school system. That will always be the primary draw, and it is also what can unlock opportunities for advancement in other areas of the city and of the community. And so I think one of the misperceptions that's, and I not certainly would not
Right.
assign that misperception to President Cook, or frankly any specific members of the municipal council, because I've always, all joking aside, I've thoroughly enjoyed the relationship that I've individually enjoyed with the municipal council and that this committee has. And of course, we have disagreements from time to time, and we're supposed to. Unfortunately, sometimes, maybe because it sells newspapers, those disagreements can be reduced to the term squabbling. But I would say that's really just two public bodies trying to do their job for the community. But it is not the case that when the school committee communicates our vision or our priorities for the school district, it is to the detriment of other components of the municipal government or other components of the community. It's in fact quite the opposite. It stems from a belief that a community situated as Attleboro is, serving the population that we do, geographically where we are, that a continuously improving school system where families can be assured that through the public school system their children will enjoy a continuously expanding array of opportunities when they grow older, that will in fact empower the city to make progress toward all of its public policy challenges. And that's why we say that the quality of life in Attleboro will be determined by the quality of education offered to students. And to that end, when the school committee communicates a budget request or any other type of communication, while it may be addressed to Mayor Dumas or may be addressed to the municipal council, our communication is always to the community at large, because it's our responsibility to make sure that the community knows that while costs are always expanding across the spectrum of government services, that the specific costs of public education are increasing at a more rapid rate than other types of costs. And the reason for that is that the environment in which our students are graduating into is increasingly competitive. And for that reason, I think that's why, frankly, state law provides for an autonomous governing body of one particular department. And it's why we have a responsibility to continue to advocate and to communicate clearly that nothing will have a bigger impact on the quality of life in Attleboro than the quality of the school system. So, again, this is, as you said, these challenges will never go away.
Right.
I mean, this is an ongoing and continuous struggle that all public school systems will face because, frankly, as a society, we don't always put the interests of people who can't vote ahead of the rest of the community. It's something that all school systems need to deal with.
And again, this also underscores, again, the importance of maintaining this communication.
Mhm.
We know that reasonable people, can disagree in a reasonable manner. And in terms of going on, I like to envision the future of the city as one that's, across all aspects is continually improving and, and growing. And I think when you look at some of the projects that we've been involved with, as a city, the downtown revitalization, sports complex, some of the other things that we're doing in terms of zoning, for example, it's all that mindset of trying to continually improve. I mean, personally, the way that I was brought up, my education and background, my work ethic, is to constantly be seeking to improve. I was not one of those people that after I walked across the stage and got my college diploma, I didn't pick up a book again. It's an ongoing, something I always convey to my students, especially in the age in which we're living now. You have to constantly be, improving yourself, maybe even, reforming yourself to go in a different direction, as the case may be. But it's an ongoing thing. And personally, part of the reason I want to get involved in local government was I want to see, our community move forward. And I wanted to have a say, in that as much as I could in terms of trying to, continue improvement across the board. So again, we can have disagreements, but it's like Lincoln in his first inaugural, relative to the southern states, was making mention that extending the peace offering at that point about, as you remember, Jim, Mr. Stores rather, about the need for friendship and the need to be able to work together to resolve differences of opinion. And again, as I've often said, to my colleagues on the council, I don't expect us to love each other. I don't expect us to agree on everything, but I certainly expect us, to respect each other, and act accordingly. And that's an ongoing effort constantly.
And a good way to keep doing that is to keep talking, which
That's
we appreciate.
And that, as I said, that was part of my reason for wanting to, and I appreciate. I know I reached out to Mr. Tyler at the end of the last term, and also yourself at the beginning of this term, about having this type of informal or formal, depending on the point of view, exchange of information, somewhat similar to that I set up with or advocated with the ARA, so we would be able to keep things going and keep things moving in the right direction.
Right.
And again, we know what our job is, and this item of the Quello School is a reminder.
Right.
We know that we're not trying to
No, of
set
course
school
not.
policy. We know, as with that other situation back in the late summer, we were not, contrary to what was written, we were not trying to do your job. There was obviously some miscommunication, as we all know of.
Yeah.
But we were, in that case, I think we were all in the same, both legislative bodies were on board.
Yeah.
And we both knew that the other had not overstepped their bounds. There was just some communication breakdown
Right.
that needed to be addressed. And I think the end result was it made for a stronger process going forward.
I think so too. So,
So,
President Cook, I want to thank you again
You're most welcome.
for joining us tonight and for the thoroughness of your presentation and briefing.
you.
And I believe my last presentation was in July, so although I'll certainly be seeing you on October 6th, as I believe
Okay.
members of our administration committee will as well, but I will be
Right.
speaking in the near future. So.
But I think sometime before, and I'll be back, I'm sure, before
Sure,
the end of the
absolutely.
before the end.
You
of
know
the
you're always
year.
welcome.
But likewise, you're always welcome. If any of you have any questions about any matters involving, feel free to call me at any time. I'd be glad
We
to
will.
sit down and talk and meet. I know I've done that with a few of you, and again, I appreciate you taking the amount of time tonight.
Of course, no, very important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Cook.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll depart momentarily from the order of our agenda. Mrs. Scales has been kind enough to offer to read our consent agenda tonight. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, first we have a motion to accept donations of 2 cases plus 6 reams of copy paper to Coelho and Wamsutta Middle Schools, 2 cases plus 2 reams of copy paper to the Studley Elementary School, 3 cases of copy paper with an estimated total value of $180 from the Brennan Parent Organization to Brennan Middle School.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. A motion to accept the donation of 100 children books to Willett Elementary School from the Bookworm Foundation with an estimated value of $400.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. A motion to accept the donation of 16 used HP ProBook 6460 laptops with an estimated value of $275 each to Attleboro High School from the CSM Group of North Attleboro.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And a motion to approve a field trip proposal for 16 grade 9 through 12 high school students to attend the Mass Conference on March 9th, 2016 at the Hyannis Conference Center.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. I think next we will go to Mr. Stowe, the student representative of the school committee, to give us the Attleboro update. Oh,
Mr. Rooney emailed it to me, but I couldn't print it.
okay. So,
Sorry.
Okey dokes. Very good. We just have a little problem with Attleboro update.
We have a problem with the Attleboro update?
Oh, wait, nope.
Oh, wait.
I got the
Oh,
email to
wait.
load.
Just in time.
I mean, I'm gonna assume you don't want me to read all of these, because there's like 400 of them.
All right, pick a few.
Here we go. Alright, so the Rome Boulevard race taking place on the 4th, which is Sunday, I believe, from 8 to 3 at the track. Picture days for Coelho and Hill Roberts are October 6th and 7th. AHS has its college career day on October 8th from 8:30 to 10 a.m. in all 3 cafeterias that's during school. Studley has a family barbecue October 8th. There's an early release day for professional development on October 9th.
And we meet again on the 5th, so if you got anything else good, we will,
Alright,
unless
perfect.
there's anything major that, no?
Nah.
Look good?
Wait, actually,
Okay.
there was one about the financial aid that I feel like is probably going to be important.
Okay.
So the AHS financial aid night is October 22nd.
October
Which
22nd.
something
October
we probably
22nd,
plan
financial aid
for.
night. And are we doing free combs on picture day? Do you know? I'm just kidding.
I have no idea.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stowe. We appreciate it, as always. We'll
Our
move-
picture day actually already passed.
Did you get a comb?
No.
I
We
have
just-
a-
we
I have
walked
a-
in
I have
this
a-
year.
Mr. Stowe, I have a joke ready for you, but I'm gonna hold off for the time being. All right, we'll move on to the consideration of the request to use Qualla Middle School as the Ward 1 voting center on November 3rd, 2015. We discussed this briefly already. The request did come. I want to express our gratitude to representatives from the city administration for being sure to put the school committee on notice that this was something that the election commission was considering sending as a request to the municipal council. It's currently before the elections and ordinances committee of the city council. I have asked our administration to confirm one last time that they are confident that there's no logistical or security concerns with regard to the use of Quilla Middle School as the Ward 1 polling place on November 3rd, 2015. Mr. Furtado, do we have confirmation of that?
There's a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to go over some of the particulars of that at the school with the
Okay.
election commission, so.
So, to be clear, what this, the committee's action tonight would give authorization to use Coelho Middle School as the polling place. Obviously, if this administration at any point comes to the understanding that there is a logistical or security concern inconsistent with what the committee has been led to believe, then the administration is certainly empowered to inform the city that they will not be able to use Coelho Middle School, but this is just our approval of the use. Mr. Storrs.
Do we have any understanding of where they're planning, knowing Qualla, where they're planning to have this, how they're going to prevent any, migration? I mean, there's a
My
lot of
understanding is
concerns.
that there will be Attleboro police on hand from.
Additional than normal?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's already
They're
been.
gonna use the gym, which has its
The
own
gym,
entrance.
okay.
So that it'll be segmented from the school operations, daily operations.
Now, what about restroom use?
We're going over those kinds of details tomorrow morning at 10.
I mean, as you mentioned, I definitely see the positives of how this can relate to education, but, this is, something that we haven't had to deal with as of yet. There's a lot of concerns.
But my understanding is that Attleboro has used schools prior to this possibility.
In the history of the city,
In the
that's true,
history,
but certainly
yeah.
it's been generations.
That's right. And,
Yeah.
and I have discussed with Mr. Bowles, the utmost thing right now is the safety and security of our kids. And the details will in fact be ironed out. And I don't believe that there'll be any of substantial issues associated with, there's nothing that we're not gonna be able to resolve.
But if there is,
But
obviously,
if there
this
is,
is
we-
not the
we get the
committee
feeling from the committee.
obligating the administration to use,
Correct.
to authorize its use. It's just granting you permission to do so.
Yeah.
The,
Yes, Mr.
the,
Storrs.
the next issue, of course, would be parking. Knowing Qualla Middle School, parking is full, just based as it is. If also now you're having hundreds of voters showing up, how are they gonna deal with that issue?
Mr. Storrs is more optimistic on turnout than many
Well,
people in the city.
that may be, okay, even if it's half of what I'm saying.
No, but I think the important point is that, first, again, if
Parking
there's
is a
any
concern.
logistical concerns, then the administration needs to put a stop to it. But the second point is that because it works this year, assuming it does and it works smoothly, frankly, it's part of why I impressed that point upon President Cook earlier, was that, this is a local election with not many races on the ballot. the presidential election next year will be a very different story, and there will be a substantially higher number of voters coming out in 2016 than 2015, and what works this year may very well not work next year.
And my assumption is that if we approve it this year, they're going to assume that this is going to be approved
No, well, not if
year
they're
after
listening.
year
Not if
after
they're
year.
listening tonight. They're not, because this is not permission to use any school for any purpose other than Ward 1 polling place on this specific date. And any other purpose will need to come back before the governing body of the school system. Mr. Furtado?
Yeah, I would welcome anybody on the committee or in the community to, send an email in. Again, we have a meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning, so I know it's short notice, but if there are any particular detailed questions anybody would have regarding the operations of using the school that way, we'd be happy to field them tomorrow.
Well, the questions don't need to be asked by the meeting tomorrow. I mean, I think we have a general understanding that the security of the building, the logisticals with regard to parking, restrooms, and whatnot, all of those need to be taken into account. If the administration is not comfortable that that's the case, then you need to not allow them to use it as a polling place. Mr. Larson?
Typically at the polling places around the city, on election day, there are people standing out at the street, on behalf of different candidates, one way or the other, and there's signage that is put down. And I guess my only request is that if in fact there are going to be people out at the street on behalf of different candidates, one way or the other, and we've got the students coming in and out from a walking point of view, that we maybe talk with the police department or the appropriate individuals to find a way to separate the candidate staff and the candidate signage from the students, and any obstruction for bus drivers and the rest of all that as part of your discussion, because I mean, everyone's going to want to be in the front at the same time during the course of the day when the students are coming in, when the students are leaving, because the polling places will be open presumably before school starts and after school's over. So obviously there'll be two rather critical times of the day that there'll be a lot of interaction between the student population and the general population at the front of the school. So
I know in recent years that those supporters have been cordoned off, so that when that designated area is chosen, to Mr. Larson's point, it will just have to be chosen in a way that poses, frankly, no disruption in any way to students or their day. Mr. Withers?
I'm not as concerned with the logistical issues as obviously the safety issues, but the safety concerns are pretty significant here. So my question is, what is the benefit to the schools of doing this?
Again, I think there are, I don't think it's life-altering benefits. I wouldn't characterize it like that, but I would say that we, as a department, which is a unique department with our own autonomous, independently elected governing body, I think we do have a certain level of responsibility to be as cooperative as we can be, and there are substantial limitations on how cooperative we can be, given our mission is first and foremost to protect and educate students. But I think it has to some degree something to do with just the idea of being a good constituent member of the municipality. I also think, as President Cook alluded to, there is a benefit to bringing that type of civic engagement into the school environment. To some degree, that's more an intangible benefit that, we're talking a little aspirational, but to whatever degree I would certainly hope that students at Brandon and Wamsutta are made aware that it's election day just as much as Coelho was, and seeing a couple of people with a sign, I'm not sure exactly to what degree that enhances that experience, but if it's I do think there is some benefit with regard to that. So it's a spirit of cooperation, and I would also say that if there's going to be a time to see if this is something that we can do without disrupting the school day, this is the election to try it, because I'm cautiously optimistic that there'll be greater turnout in the years ahead. Mr. Withers, then Mr. Larson, then Mr. Storrs.
How strong is the recommendation from the administration that we do this? Is it,
My sentiment was exactly what Mr. Murphy's is, as far as the cooperation with the city, looking for a polling place, looking for the intangibles, advantages of our kids, to look at the democratic process actually evident right then and there on that particular day. It'll become even greater the following year in the presidential election. It's more of the spirit of cooperation with the city. and getting those other intangibles associated with our kids.
I would add that the strategic plan that we'll be considering in the next few weeks explicitly calls on us to find ways to bring the community into our schools and in the form of community engagement, and that while we have to weigh each opportunity to make sure that it makes sense and fits, our other responsibilities, and that we, don't want to disrupt the school day or create unsafe situations. That's, those are logistical concerns that we'll have to iron out to make sure this one works. But anytime we can bring people in, we should.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Thank you, Mr. Shane. Mr. Larson.
Building on Mr. Sawyer's comment, I think this is a great opportunity for the schools to have the public in the building so we can show off the positive things that are happening in the district. And I certainly hope that the administration and Mr. Bowles work to put on, if they're going to be coming into the gym and walking around, I certainly hope we take the opportunity to, put up as many exhibits, or, whether it's art or whether it's, things from the CTE program here at the high school, or things that are going on at Coelho, or, we're going to have a small audience, but, why not take the opportunity that it is to demonstrate some of the great things that are happening in the district.
Very good point. Thank you, Mr. Larson. Mr. Storrs.
Another question I would have is, they're taking over the gymnasium, which is limited access, and I get that, so they're not going to be necessarily walking around the schools and there'll be security, but some students will be affected by this because, at a minimum, those who had phys ed that day will be, affected. How that affected, how that effect is a question I would have as well. The other question I would have, and I don't know if anybody here has that answer, is what is their contingency if this body voted no tonight?
Well, that's the city's problem.
Absolutely.
And the municipal
but-
council hasn't even approved its
Right.
changing it yet. So
But the reason I ask that is there a backup? Knowing Ward 1, I
I don't know.
can't
but
envision another
What I
backup.
know is
That's why I'm
that
asking.
if we were to say no, I don't think they'd come and ask us to use Hill Roberts. I'm confident of. So I don't know. And while I want to be a cooperative constituent of this municipality, I don't want to be not to the extent that I'm going to go plan where they should use if they can't use
I
Coelho.
was just wondering if there is a backup plan, that's all.
Where was the voting before?
It was-
Place that's been sold, but again,
Yes.
not an issue before
our
the school
problem.
committee.
Right.
I would say, one, I want to extend our gratitude to the representatives of the city administration who put this on our radar so we knew it was a question we had to consider. I would also ask that if there are any other questions of this nature, that they be communicated through the superintendent to the school committee formally, so that I can, as the chairman of the school committee, refer this to the appropriate subcommittee so it can be thoroughly vetted. Just a request. Are there any other comments or questions related to authorizing the use of Coelho Middle School? Mr. Withers.
I'm just struggling with this because I understand the idea behind the strategic, or the thought in the strategic plan of bringing the public in and being a good neighbor, but we're talking about completely disrupting the school day, bringing in public into our schools for a limited time in a small part of the building where we're going to want to get them in and out as quickly as possible. This just isn't the scenario I envision. So
And I think that's a perfectly valid point. What I would say to the administration is that if in your due diligence you find that this is completely disruptive to the school day, or frankly, anything beyond minimally disruptive, then you should not allow them to do it. That if students' schedules are being thrown out of whack substantially, there are 2 gyms, so I suspect that won't be the case. If there are even a remote hint of a problem with regard to safety and security, obviously you would have a responsibility not to allow its use. Or if it's just there's any logistical reason that it's not feasible. I think the reason it's important for us to consider it at this moment is that if the administration concludes through this meeting or any other meeting that I hope is scheduled in the very near future, while it is not the school committee's problem in terms of what the alternative becomes, we do want to give the city ample opportunity and ample time to consider their options and determine a contingency plan. So that would be what I would say about that. Okay, are there any other comments or questions related to this? Okay, so I would just like a motion to authorize the administration to give permission to the city to use Coelho Middle School as the polling place on November 3rd.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? I'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Singer? Mr. Tyler?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy, yes. Mrs. Scales?
Yes.
Mr. Withers?
No.
Mrs. Storrs?
No.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes 5-2. Okay, we'll move on, and thank you again. I think all those points are extremely important. I appreciate that they were raised. I implore the city to work, as I know they will, cooperatively with the school administration to make sure that this is in fact the best interest of the district. We'll move on now to what is potentially, although not definitely, our final strategic planning update prior to the committee's final consideration. The committee knows that 2 weeks ago, Mr. Sawyer and representatives of the school administration brought to the school committee a very detailed and substantive presentation on what is essentially the meat of the proposed strategic plan. Tonight's discussion focuses, frankly, on the more procedural elements of the strategic plan, which is, frankly, equally important to make sure that what has been conjured by the ad hoc committee one day becomes reality. And the two pieces that Mr. Sawyer will be sharing with us tonight are, and one is presented to you on the screen, and the other is available to you at your seat. What is essentially the objective assignments, meaning this is a key that you can use along with the objectives document that again is the heart of the strategic plan, to see which group is considered essentially responsible for developing the action steps tied to the objectives, of which we went over in detail last week. And also, as you see on the screen there, the plan has been developed in a manner in which it will be executed over the course of 5 phases. And this document represents the timeline by which each of those phases is envisioned to play out. Is that a good introduction? Mr. Sawyer and his co-chair, Mrs. Scales, and you can take it from there.
Okay. So, basically, I would think of the strategic plan as having 4, I was going to say phases, but I should use a different word considering the way that this is constructed. There are 4 segments of the plan. The first is the first 6 months are the opportunity for the various people who have been assigned. So in this document, you see which objectives are assigned to which groups of people in the district. So these groups then have to develop action plans, and those action plans will be their plan for accomplishing those objectives. The objectives were written with a 3-year time span in mind. So even though this is a 5-year plan, it's hard to project out 5 years from now what we'll even be talking about. And furthermore, as much as whatever you set, it's good to have a little bit of time on the backside of what you're trying to do, because no matter how hard you try, there are times that you need a little bit of extra time to finish the work that you're completing. And so we've built a little bit of that into it. So that first segment is the next couple months between now and January to develop action plans for these objectives. Then the next group are basically 3 calendar years. So January to December of 2016, then January to December of 2017, and then January to December of 2018. Each of those 12-month periods is broken up into 2 6-month subsets, which I refer to as phases. So there's 6 phases, 3 years broken into 6-month blocks, and the action plans will describe what will happen in each of those segments. That's what the plan will be built around. So what can we accomplish in each 6-month chunk of time? And at the end of each of those, we will report back to the school committee our progress, on those action plans. After that, we'll move into a self-evaluation. where we look at how we've done, whether or not we've met our goals, whether or not the plan is accomplishing what we want it to. And then from that, we will, in the last year, establish new goals and develop the following plan so that at the end of this 5-year plan, we'll already have the next 5-year plan in place rather than having a gap between plans.
Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Sawyer, I love the idea. I just got one question on this, because now we're going to have every year, we're gonna have either our MCAS or POC or whatever testing. So what have we built into there? We're looking at a goal, a 5-year goal, but our scores are gonna tell us where we have to go. In a sense, even though we're looking at a long-range objective, we also need to meet those year-to-year objectives and try to improve upon them.
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. This isn't going to replace our other concerns. We still have to every year report on a number of things, and I believe in the reconfiguration of the subcommittees that each of them were given, clear directives in terms of what they need to produce. So, teaching and learning is going to have to, on a yearly basis, describe in our annual report how we are doing academically, and how we're doing academically will inform our evaluation of the work we're doing and help to set future goals. But these reports are more about the plan specifically and how, we've set these objectives. We're not just going to hope they get done. We need to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that we're making the efforts that we're saying we're going to make, and that those progress reports will help us to report out on how we're doing.
Okay, so they'll be used almost as a benchmark to see whether or not we're, okay.
I think it's a very good point and a good question by Mr. Tyler. I think it illustrates the point that through this strategic plan, the district is in some ways raising its own standards. That whereas I do think in the past sometimes we measured our progress entirely by our annual score reports, that now we will look at it in a more comprehensive manner. We will still hold ourselves accountable for making sure that achievement gaps are narrowed and scores continue to maintain their upward trajectory. But in addition to that, we will look at the district as a whole and see, are we in fact advancing the objectives for purposes of working toward those 3 overarching goals of more personalized guided planning for all students, for an improvement in the quality of the learning experiences that all students enjoy, and greater community and external engagement to the benefit of all students. So this is, if this seems daunting, I think that it should. I mean, this is a very ambitious strategic plan developed by a very ambitious group of community stakeholders who want to see this district move forward and to do so aggressively. Mr. Scales.
The timetable is very critical to the success of the plan, so that these people, the different groups that are going to be working on the plan are going to be accountable, and they're going to constantly always being reminded of what they're working on and being able for us to see the success.
Thank you, Mr. Scales. And I would just add also that it will be critical that the school committee that sits here in the coming years provide the type of supportive but robust oversight necessary to make sure that what the group has proposed and what we've discussed here so often actually happens. And I know that's certainly important to Mr. Sawyer, and I know it's important to all the people who crafted this. So, but thank you for both comments, Mr. Sawyer. Anything else to add?
No, I think that the added accountability is an important thing, and test scores are an important measure. They are something that we need to pay close attention to. They tell us something important about the work that we do. However, if you only measure your success with test scores, then you become obsessive about tests, and there's a lot of reason to believe that that's not best practice. Right. That we need to be concerned about a wider range of things, and I think this is an attempt to develop a wider view of what we do.
Yeah, and how we define success. But for those, and there are segments of the population who want to abandon test scores in their entirety. That's not what this plan does. That's not what the Commonwealth has committed to. That's not what this district has committed to. That is not a part of this strategic plan. But it is, I think, fair to say that we are recalibrating how we look at it. So that requires a nuanced approach, and I think sometimes people want to paint in such broad strokes that you're either, a test guy or you're, learning should be fun guy. And that's not just, the world just does not operate in those types of concrete parameters. Mr. Larson?
There's so many different parts of this that really, it's a change of culture, it's a change of attitude, it's a change of way of looking at things. And making sure that this all stays on track and doing the segments in the 6-month blocks that Mr. Sawyer was talking about. And if we can keep everybody involved on these timelines, we're going to be working on the things that we're supposed to be working on before we get the results of the test scores, instead of getting the test scores and going, oh, I guess we need to do this now. Because we're going to be so much further ahead of the fact that with this plan laid out the way it is, identifying what we need to work on, what we should be working for, the test results will really just be another one of the measures to back up that what we've been doing is the right thing to be doing, and we'll be able to adjust going forward using that as one of the inputs. But the fact that we'll be working on this ahead of time instead of waiting for the results and then making our decisions after the fact, I think is such a culture shift to the whole process that, and it's going to be hard for people to get their heads wrapped around it sometimes, but it's going to be so much better, I think, in the long run. That.
Thank you, Mr. Jim. And if I could, I think you're absolutely right, Bill. But we have to keep informing people that we're no longer going to be that type of district. We were that district before, where test scores meant everything, and we needed it at the time. I'm not trying to take away from that, but there was a lot of things that we had to not do as a district to achieve those test scores, to raise those, and some of them were not acceptable and not a good way to bring a district forward. So I appreciate both of you saying that, but we have to get, the culture is, we have to get people conditioned to say, well, don't jump off the boat because of the test score or whatever. We had to give up too much for those test scores to get where they are at this stage. Now we're trying to culture an environment where the whole student's needs are being realized, instead of just that one test score at one time of the year, and that's what we're being based upon as a school system. That's not where we want to go, but I think it's going to take a little conditioning for people, that's all. I mean, they're going to see highs and lows, but you have to be able to look at where we're going to be 4 or 5 years down the road. So I appreciate both your comments, but again, we just got to let people know that this is, they could be. There's no reason to jump off the cliff because we're low on a math score on a certain year. We're working towards a greater goal, so.
Yeah, it's because it's about the long-term trajectory. And as
Exactly.
long as we feel that the tests are accurately depicting student improvement and their improvement of their capability to take on opportunities when they graduate, then we should continue to prioritize testing. And no one should take this as interpretation of the teaching abandoning that, because that's not what it is. And that's what's, I think it's right. And what, to me, the challenge of the conditioning is getting a community to embrace a much more nuanced position, because the nuance of the position is testing is extremely important. It's just not everything, and there are many, many other things that are extremely important. And as Mr. Tyler says, that will certainly take time. And I would also say that there will be moments over the course of the 5 years that this plan will guide the district, in which there will be, either because there are, as we had tonight, a respectful and reasonable disagreement over whether a particular decision in fact advances a particular objective. That will happen. This plan does not aspire to answer every one of our questions. If we did, frankly, we could all go home. We wouldn't need administrators. We could just give everybody a copy of the plan and off we go. That's not what this does. And in those moments of disagreement, I think it will be important to remember the spirit in which this plan was developed and the process that took place over the course of a full calendar year to bring us to this point where we go from a district without a strategic plan that has good intentions, but oftentimes lurches from one challenge to another, to a consensus-based set of goals that we embrace in the hope of advancing the interests of students. So, so we've talked about the five. We're not calling them phases anymore.
No, we are calling them phases.
Okay. Because in the narrative, we're calling them phases, so hopefully we are. But between this document and your assignments document, the school committee has now seen multiple times and discussed essentially all of the substantive components of the strategic plan. There are some narrative pieces, introductory pieces, executive summary pieces that will be circulated in the coming days, but it would be my expectation that we may be voting on a proposed plan as early as next week. Mr. Larson?
Nope.
I'm sorry, Mr. Storrs.
Do we foresee all the separate subcommittees reporting into the school committee on a 6-month basis, annual basis, or something of that nature, or will it all be through the central administration?
It'll be through the administration, although we can certainly at times, bring people in to talk about specific issues.
And the central administration will be briefing the school committee on a regular basis. And that's the 6-month progress.
I thought that was the question.
It kind of was.
Yeah.
But they will come before the committee.
The central administration will be reporting on all the different work
Yeah,
being
and
done.
it's
by
up to the
subcommittee.
administration who they feel needs to have present to represent the work that's been completed. I also think it's important to note that during those progress reports will call for both a summary as to what's been advanced and achieved in the preceding 6-month period, and what work is essentially forecast for the coming 6 months. So it'll be really a continuous cycle of updates, such so that the school committee, the central administration, and most importantly the community can hold the district accountable for making the type of progress that's envisioned. Or any other questions or comments or anything else to add, Mrs. Storrs?
How do you foresee the individual school improvement plans being affected by this work?
There are actually direct ties into the plan. So in certain places where it's appropriate,
So each building administrator will be fully aware of how all of this affects their individual schools.
yeah, and school improvement plans are supposed to be tied to district plans, as are all of the educator evaluation plans as well. So it'll be nice to be able to tie all these things together in a more cohesive way.
Thank you. So again, I would hope that currently our meeting is scheduled for October 5th. We've got a few scheduling logistic issues that need to be worked out where it's possible. We will switch that out with either the 7th or the 8th. We will figure that out in the next 24 hours. And again, I expect that there will be the substance of the plan has now been discussed multiple times publicly, but I would imagine that we may have a vote next week. All right, we'll move on now to our enrollment report, which was to be presented by Ms. DeAngelis. Unfortunately, Ms. DeAngelis is very under the weather at the moment, and we wish her a speedy recovery. Mr. Sawyer did volunteer to offer a brief summary of the enrollment and registration report, but I imagine Ms. DeAngelis will be joining us sometime in the near future to give a more thorough presentation that I know she had prepared. So, Mr. Sawyer?
Yeah, so
That means go easy on the questions to him because he just got this a few hours ago as Ms. DeAngelis got ill.
hopefully I can handle it.
I hope so, too.
I mean, the bottom line is that to this point, we have registered 404 students, and at this time last year, we had registered 459, so that's 55 students less. I mean, that's, I think, the most important factor. If you look at the document, you'll see that there's sort of a weird way of organizing the numbers. The explanation for this approach is that we started school basically a week earlier. So when you compare week to week, what was going on during that week was very different from last year to this year. So I think that helps to explain some of the differences. I think it's interesting that from the period of April 30th up to August 10th, the numbers there are very similar, 87 to 72. The open registration period, that's when we have staff here at the high school and have several days of registration where we're trying to get the public to come in and register during that period during the summer. There's a big difference between those two things. You see it's 172 last year and 87 this year. But as the note explains, a little bit of the difference in those two numbers is attributable to the fact that last year we took in incomplete packets and then chased people for the parts that they were missing. And based on that experience, we realized that we needed to put the onus back on families to provide us with everything that's needed. So this year, we only accepted a packet when it was complete. And that's part of the explanation. Because when you put the 46 incomplete registrations that were returned in the next week up with the 87, the numbers are much closer, although still down, and that's part of the 55 kid difference between the 2 years. Again, first week of school this year and the 1 week prior last year are similar, and the other numbers are also similar. So just a sense of of how it unfolded this year.
Any questions specifically with regard to registrations or enrollment? We do have a second document with regard to class size. Any comments on that before we take questions?
No, I would think it's self-explanatory.
Okay, and I would just point out then that I think, what the committee has before us now is essentially the average, I assume that this is average,
Yes.
the average class sizes in each grade for each building. And, there's a little bit of two stories being told here. It is not the case that Attleboro is a district in which every class size is significantly larger than we would like it to be. That is a narrative that it is important for us to convey, that we are not, while we have many challenges, and most, if not all, stem from the structural difficulties in our budget that we've already talked about tonight, but it is critically important that we make clear that in many grade levels, we actually have class sizes that are quite favorable. In others, we don't. And if we have them, if they're too large in any area, then it's a problem, and it's one that needs to be addressed. But this is, it's a very difficult message to convey, because on one hand, we want to make clear to people that we're not a district that is bursting at the seams in the sense that every class is too large, but we are a district that has some grade levels at many schools that are unacceptable, and that is an issue that needs to be addressed in the coming years. It's also reflected in the fact, go back to the first document, that we have approximately 24 students who are not attending their neighborhood school. It appears as though Hill Roberts, well, all elementary schools with the exception of Hyman Fine, have some students that have been displaced. And Coelho Middle School, which we've talked about many times, is at capacity, and there are some small number of students who are not attending the middle school that they're geographically assigned to. And while the geographic assignments themselves are something that the strategic plan calls for a scrutinization of, and that will happen in due time, it does again speak to the budgetary difficulties, and that's to say nothing of the shortages in personnel from a support services or administration standpoint. Any questions or comments about any of the registration or enrollment data? And again, Ms. DeAngelo is certainly welcome to present in the near future. And thank you for that. Okay. Our next item, like our enrollment and registration issue that we just discussed, is one that we will be revisiting again in the near future, not necessarily because anyone is sick, but because this is an important issue that we've discussed many times. I believe we've got it on the mediums on the screen. And it's something that it's discussed throughout the strategic plan, and it's something that we've talked about ad nauseum here with good reason, the importance of making sure that we are communicating effectively with our direct stakeholders and our indirect stakeholders in order to ensure that we are constantly marketing the school system and promoting all of the good work that's taking place here. Mr. Sawyer has prepared this chart, which, as I understand, was presented at the administrator orientation this past summer to talk a little bit about the diverse types of mediums that as a district and as at the building level are utilized in order to communicate effectively. And what Mr. Suri can walk through with us how each medium has different strengths and weaknesses, and all of this will be important as the district develops a district communication strategy, which will guide our communications in the future, both in the hope that we develop an accurate narrative and a positive narrative, but also to make sure that students, families, staff, and community members are as well informed as they should be. So, Mr. Suri, do you want to take it from there?
Sure. We've been working on, as a district, the development of a communication strategy for almost a year now. And the strategic plan does call for us to codify such a strategy in a formal communication plan for the district that this is in part preparation for. In August, all the administrators spend a considerable amount of time in meetings as we try to prepare for the year to come. And this chart, which is not in any way a formal document, or it's certainly not a polished document, this is a working document as we start to get our head around our communication issues. So we brainstormed what the various media we have available to us and that we're using in the district, and we talked about the things that we thought that those things were good at and the things that we thought that they had some weaknesses at. And then from that discussion, we started to identify target applications. So if we're going to come up with a strategic plan for our communication, we want to say, okay, let's use the appropriate technology for what it's good at and not use it inappropriately. For instance, a complaint I sometimes receive from families is that in some schools their use of the Student Connect, which is the automatic calling, if you use that too often, some people don't like having that many phone calls. They don't like, the phone rings, you get up from whatever you're doing, you get there, and it's, the principal's voice, and if you hear that enough times in a week, you start to, not appreciate that so much. So
we may have exasperated that during one or two particular times where we got a little Connect Ed happy.
It's happened. That being said, there are some things for which that is the absolute best way to get out a message. It catches people's attention. And if used, I think, more sparingly, it would be, I think, even more effective. So this is an example of what we're talking about. Or another, for instance, is YouTube. We do not, as a district, use a lot of YouTube. As you know, we're using YouTube right now, right? This broadcast will end up on YouTube so that 24 people can view it. Another use of YouTube being done is the Mr. Rooney uses his Pridecast to get out information, which I think is another effective use of the technology. But really what we should be doing is thinking about two things. One, we'll all do all kinds of public events, concerts and things like that. We should be taping these things and putting them on YouTube. Sometimes parents can't make it because of busy schedules, or there's an emergency that they have to go attend to and they can't make it. Or, maybe grandma lives in another state and would love to be able to see it too. We can make these things available. Also, YouTube is great at providing short instructional videos on various topics. It's becoming more and more common. When you want to know how to do a thing, you actually go on YouTube and look it up, and there's, it's amazing how many videos there are to show you how to do X, Y, or Z. Well, every day parents have questions about how to do various things as parents in the district. How do I access this, or where do I find that? YouTube videos might be a good way for us to communicate so that the information is there for when people are looking to access it, but that we're not, bugging them. Because we use a lot of email right now, but honestly, as I think we all know, the volume of email that we all deal with makes email a less useful means than it may otherwise be. Because when you have to sort through it all, I think a lot of people don't pay as close attention to the various messages that we're sending. So it's all about tailoring the message and getting it in the right place. So we're trying to develop a strategy so that's one, that everything matches well, but also that we develop a culture around communication so that parents know where to look for the information that they're trying to find. That if it's of this nature, this is where I look. If it's that nature, that's where I look. So if we're all doing the same thing, as you come up through the district, you'll learn how we do it, and it'll become second nature that that's where I should look.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Are there any questions? Ms. Tyler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He knows what I'm gonna ask already, I bet.
Pressure's on now. I hope he does.
The Aspen school page, I love it as a parent. I think it's great. You know, you're able to watch over what your kids are doing, and there's no more the dog ate the homework or any of that. It's all on there. But why can't we have other programs that we also use, everyday mathematics and stuff like that. Why can't we take in Aspen, and let me step back for a second. Everyday mathematics is a different vendor than Aspen. But why can't we in Aspen put a link to get into everyday mathematics? So once you're logged into Aspen, now you just automatically click onto that link. You're already logged in. You're ready to go.
Yep, we have made a decision that we need to think of our websites. Right now, we have a lot of resources on our websites. We'd like to rethink of our websites as where the community goes to find out information about the school, and that for parents, Aspen is the place to get information about the school, because Aspen is through a portal. So we are really working to have it be that the homepage for the school is exactly what you're talking about. That's where all the school information is, and then we can create other pages. So all of the math resources in the district are on a given page, and all the English resources are on a given page, and all those pages will have links to all the various things that are available to parents. We want, and we talk about this all the time, we need to promote Aspen as the place. When you're not sure where to go, you go to Aspen, because even if it lives someplace else, you'll find how to get there to Aspen, because you know how it is. You forget, how do I get there? What's the address for that website? I don't remember. I lost the piece of paper they gave me. I think that happens to all of us. And or if you're logged into another computer, I bookmark things on my computer, so that's how I get to things. But if I have to use a different computer, I might not remember where it is. So if I know to go to Aspen, I'll be able to get there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Withers.
Thank you. Is there policies already in place or regulations with the building personnel or administration as to who has the authority or access to post these types of announcements or videos or emails?
There isn't policy. I think that the profile of who's doing what at each level is pretty consistent. It's not a situation where let's let Fred do it. Generally speaking, like at an elementary school, the tech teachers.
I think at Brennan, Fred does do it. You like that one?
It is
Thanks.
true.
Thank you very much. Please continue.
But no, right now that's a building-based decision made by the principal.
But it speaks to a concern that is important, that it will be addressed in part, I think, by the district communication strategy, but also in part by the policy work that will need to be associated with that, which is that we do have a need to bring about more uniformity in terms of maximizing the use. And that doesn't mean we have sort of like, we need uniformity in terms of mindset, that the culture has to be that we utilize social media for these types of purposes. We utilize the School Connect, and these types of circumstances, and particularly true for the reasons that you mentioned with regard to email. And we need to sort of establish standards, which is why I say that this is sort of an introductory conversation, because we've got some buildings, frankly, that do this very effectively. And there are various reasons for that. Sometimes it's just how long the administrator has been in that building, and that person has essentially gotten to this priority. But we need, as a district, we need to sort of we as a district will maximize the value of these mediums once we establish a culture and certain standards that are used. So that will be important. And I would just also say that there's a real urgency to this, that we've talked about communication in the abstract over the course of many times, sometimes not in the abstract, sometimes in response to particular situations. But as we make that shift that we talked about earlier tonight from a district without a strategic plan to one with a strategic plan, it will be incumbent upon us to utilize these mediums to promote the work that is then being done in the district. And that without that, we will not get the level of buy-in that we need in order to advance some of these goals and some of these objectives. And just one last note on the website. The school website, I understand, is scheduled for a revamp in the calendar year 2016. And so as we rethink what we use various mediums for, the school website versus the Aspen site, it'll be extremely important that we put that thought into what we want that website to be in advance, so that way, as soon as possible, if that's January, then it should be in January, we can see a relaunch of the website and hopefully maximize the value of that particular medium. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Stowe?
So at our SAC meetings in the last 2 weeks, we actually have been discussing what our plan is going to be for this year. And one of the first things that we discussed was the use of Aspen and other resources and stuff like that for the students, like to be more beneficiary. And I just found it really encouraging that this committee is also looking into that. So I'll let them know about that.
Thank you. Yeah, please do, and we'll certainly do what we can to collaborate with the SEC to make sure that we can maximize the value that each group is doing. Mr. Stowe mentions the Aspen. One of the questions that's come up when we've discussed this before is the Aspen application. Do we have a sense as to the scale at which the Aspen application has been embraced by the community? Do we know how many people have it?
It's very small, and we have not promoted it. We are still working on our capacity to use it.
Okay.
There's a new interface that the principals have to learn how to use. And then at the same time, we have to convince people to download the app because, their ability to use it won't be effective unless people have the app to make use of it. But there's no reason to promote getting the app if the principals don't know how to use it. So there's a little bit of a catch-22 that we're working on there.
Okay. And I think the next time we talk about this, we'd want to hear sort of what progress has been made in terms of disseminating that, in terms of making it sure its use is maximized, or its effectiveness is maximized. If it's, again, if we don't know how to use it, we shouldn't be telling people to download it, because that will quickly erode people's interest in using it. Okay. Any other questions or comments related? Mrs. Scales?
The only I didn't see down here was the reminder 101, I think they call it. Is that
Yeah, the Aspen application would replace that.
okay?
I know a lot of people are using Remind, but that's basically what Aspen's going to do for us.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so again, we will revisit this in terms of the development of the communication strategy, the expanded use of the Aspen application, the work that's being done at the Student Advisory Council, and preparations for the relaunch of the website in the next month or so. All right, we'll move on to a topic that we discussed at some length on September 14th, which is our carryover funds. And I would say that we took, I would say, and folks can characterize it as they, I think this school committee, the discussion that we had as a group and with our administrators on September 14th, I would describe that as a painstaking attempt to explain that a public entity that is prohibited from finishing a fiscal year with a deficit, and that would have a perverse incentive to finish exactly at zero, must finish with some amount of carryover funds. The Attleboro Public Schools must finish the fiscal year with a surplus. And so, if anyone thinks that the Attleboro Public Schools finishing with a surplus warrants a bold headline, I would say that sometime in the fall of 2016, you could print it now, the Attleboro Public Schools will finish with a surplus, because it's a public entity that can't finish in the red, and that would have a perverse incentive to finish at zero. And by perverse incentive, I mean what Mr. Furtado has, I think, appropriately dubbed Christmas in June, which is when everyone comes in and we essentially light a pile of cash on fire. We can't do that. And in order to address priorities in a thoughtful, deliberative, student-centric way, we need to come into this time of year and address what is as we said last last time we met, a very modest amount of carryover funds of amounting to 0.5% of a 68 plus $1 million budget. The committee did receive a follow-up memo talking about, as we had identified, I believe, 5 or 6 priorities that are in line with what essentially the remainder of the carryover funds. And September 14th, the committee did authorize up to $80,000 use toward some outstanding invoices, which will have to go before the municipal council, some emergency repairs to copy machines at buildings that had essentially exhausted their copying capacity, and some security infrastructure at certain buildings. That amounted to $20,000, $50,000 for the copy machines. That was the remainder of $280,000. One thing that was not mentioned on September 14th and was essentially an oversight was the committee had previously, on August 31st, authorized $19,000 of use of carryover funds for the special education consultant. That leaves us obviously with $261,000. The recommendation provided tonight would address 3 of the 5 priorities that were discussed on September 14th, and also honor the recommendation to preserve essentially a reserve of the carryover funds between $100,000 and $150,000, which again, by law, would need to be expended prior to the remainder of the fiscal year, but would be held in reserve in the case of any emergencies. I think it's important to note, as we have over the course of the past several months, the distinction between maintenance and capital expenses. And even in an instance in which there would be an emergency expense, I think it would be incumbent upon the school committee to communicate clearly that even in emergency situations, educational dollars should not be put toward capital expenses. Every time we do so, we're spending money in a way that the law does not intend, that taxpayers do not intend, and that frankly is detrimental to the educational interests of students. But the recommendation, and I'd ask Mr. Sawyer or Mr. Furtado or Mr. Sheehan, anyone who'd like to comment on it, would essentially to address 3 distinct priorities that we've discussed at length before. Supplemental technology, which in addition to just providing greater technological capacity or access to students, would also address some of the equity issues that we're seeing in certain buildings. Guidance software, which again is tied directly to goal 1 of the strategic plan and the need to develop more personalized guided planning for students. And then in after-school initiatives, which the administration has presented on multiple times, and essentially this investment would allow for what in some ways would amount to a pilot program, and not just a pilot program, frankly. It would allow the time throughout the course of the 15-16 academic year to both expand after-school opportunities at the middle school level and would help lay the groundwork for further expansion and development of those programs in the coming years. So what's not on here are the supply issue, which essentially was a consequence of the budget cuts that were undertaken. There are various reasons for that, including the fact that once we impose that budget cut, the preparations are underway to operate with a reduced supply inventory, although again, we knew at the time that that's not sustainable. That's why we've said it every single time we've met, that the budget situation is not sustainable. And also the ST Math program, which is still a high curriculum priority, but is one that would hopefully be addressed in the near future. So, Mr. Sawyer, anything you want to add with regard to the 3 initiatives that were sort of chosen from the group of 5, or the basis for that?
Just that they are, I think, high leverage priorities, and that they fit the strategic plan as well.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments?
I have just one quick
Mrs. Scales.
question. The guidance software, I know it's only going to be used at the high school for now. Will we need to make another investment to bring it to the middle schools, or will that cover it all?
It depend. I mean, one, it'll depend on which company we go with, which version, and which add-ons we add on. So, if we don't include middle school at this time, then when we do include middle school, there will be extra.
Okay.
Mr. Withers.
I know that the after-school programming priority and cost would be something that would be a continuing cost going forward if we're able to continue to fund it. The guidance software, is that a one-time fee to purchase it, or is that an annual subscription fee?
There's an annual subscription, but there are one-time costs associated with, implementing and training.
Do we know what the annual subscription fees are?
Again, it depends on exactly which services we include and which grades we add, but, it's very imaginable that an annual subscription would be around 20 grand.
Okay.
And I would just say just one thing. I think transparency is important here. When we talk about the nature of one-time expenses as opposed to reoccurring expenses, and Mr. Cook mentioned that tonight, that's something that every public body deals with when we handle budgeting in this type of public process. That, I think, is a budgeting approach that is particularly useful when there is an agreement as to the sustainability of a budget. But in a world where there is a repeated recognition of a major structural deficit resulting in the fact that the entire budget is not sustainable, then I really do think that distinction at some level, not entirely, but at some level, becomes a bit of a fiction. That was one of the points that was addressed when we were fortunate enough to fund the 2 teaching positions in late August, early September. That the question was, well, isn't that reoccurring? Well, yes, it is, but we've got a reoccurring problem that we're dealing with every single year, and so we could name a host of reoccurring priorities that currently are not funded, and there will need to be as much leverage as possible to fund and advance those priorities in the coming years, because the current situation is not sustainable. And that doesn't mean the schools should be given a blank check. And if anything, it means it's even more incumbent on the schools to justify how we're spending money and how we're advancing priorities of students, to make progress. But if we, I think if we were to go up and down our budget and say we're only going to fund things that are reoccurring, there'd be a major gap as to what we actually do need to fund. So I think that's an important part of the discussion. Mr. Withers?
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I wasn't meaning to say
No,
that
I
or imply that we shouldn't fund anything that's a continual expense. Although I do think it's sad in a way, or sad in a big way, that we have to fund these major priorities through a budget surplus, and that that's the only way we can do it.
I totally agree, and I think my hope would be that by doing so, we would exert the maximum leverage possible to make sure that these priorities are kept in mind going forward. And I think that's pressure on the school committee. I think it's pressure on the school administration. I think it's pressure on the community and the municipal government as well. But no, I know you weren't. I just was jumping at the opportunity to make the point which you provided, and I appreciate it. Ms. Singer.
I just have a question about the first one, and I completely understand that it falls within the strategic plan. And my question was, it addresses the inequalities that you said existed at these schools. If you, by number 1, bringing the 5 schools to 2 Chrome cards, so that all of them, is increasing the 3 schools that already have 2 Chrome cards to add projectors and documents then also create an inequality, or did the 5 schools above have those already? Does that make
Across the
sense?
district, we're all in different places. Some schools have more than others. It's a hard thing to measure because, sadly, a lot of teachers have just taken it upon themselves to buy these things themselves. So, when I walk into a classroom and I see a projector and a document camera, it's hard for me to tell whether that's school equipment or personal equipment. But the real point here is that some schools are working really hard to get ahead on the technology, and so they've provided. And when we say, okay, well, you don't get one because you have one,
Right.
They feel like, well, then you're telling me that I shouldn't try to get ahead. So by providing them those funds so that they could buy more classroom technology, they'll feel like there was a benefit that they got. It's just not the same benefit that the Chrome card, that we just need everybody to get up to 2, because with all the ways that we're using it, We lived without any for a while, but now, one isn't enough. And it'll greatly increase our ability to do online testing. So, we just had to make a decision a week or two ago whether or not to do our ELL testing with the state, that we would take the access test. The ELL kids take the access test every year. We're going to use the computer test rather than paper test this year. And that's made possible by Chrome cards. So just an example of how these are multi-purpose technology.
And since it was my words, I feel like I need to take responsibility for them. This is an effort to address the equity issues. It is not necessarily an effort to resolve the equity issues we're seeing at building issues. So a bit of a distinction there. But any other questions or comments related to this? I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt the use of the carrier funds outlined in the school committee's memo, which amounts to, does anyone have the amount? $132,000.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, and thank you to the members of the administration for developing that proposal. And we'll move on to an MSBA Attleboro High School initiative update, which we've already heard. The gist of the update tonight is that there is a public hearing scheduled on October 6th. It sounds as though there are a few public hearings, some of which may be lengthy, also for October 6th. So I will reach out to President Cook and see if we can get a sense as to the timing of those. I know there will be representatives from the school administration and the school committee present. And while a tax classification public hearing does sound like a good way to spend a Tuesday night, in the event anyone has any other plans, it would be a good idea. And if we can't get at the timing on that, Mr. Stowe will just have to represent us and give us a call when our item comes up. So, Mr. Furtado, besides the scheduling of the public hearing, are there any other substantive updates?
Not at this time.
Okay. Thank you for that, and we'll move on to an issue that's come before the committee related to the revolving accounts of both athletics and transportation. The school committee, like every other department, there were budget cuts that were imposed on the athletic department, and while those specific shortages were essentially bridged through the raising of fees that the school committee imposed at the end of the summer, there have been some unanticipated costs that have come up, and an unanticipated surplus in the transportation revolving account as a result of the new infrastructure that was procured. And Mr. Furtado, is there anything I'm forgetting? You look like you want to pass something out.
I wouldn't. We certainly anticipated there being a surplus with the continuation of the fee-for-service program. What we did not do is plan for the expenditure of all the funds. So there are some funds
available funds, fully anticipated. Mr. Furtado knew it was coming. Thought about it.
Once the committee made the decision to keep fee-for-service, that
there you go.
made it an event. Yeah.
All right, and so the point here, and again, there are additional funds in the transportation revolving account. I know there have been some have been put to use with regard to some infrastructure issues that needed to be addressed, security and whatnot. But the idea would the transportation of students, obviously it's an appropriate use in either the athletic revolving account, which is normally used for this purpose, and the transportation revolving account. And so to provide for some relief, the idea was to essentially tap into that transportation revolving account. Any questions or comments related to this? Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, if you will. I mean, 5 years ago, we hit the athletic department pretty hard, and they just kind of recovered from those in the last year or so until this year, and then we kind of hit them hard again, as we did unilaterally across the board. We don't have the funding. But I think one of the things we're talking about here in transportation tonight is that we can't neglect to say is that since now we have given up our Attleboro Public School transportation, we're dependent upon Bloom to provide all our transportation and for athletic issues. So, and it's at a higher cost. So, if there's any time that the athletic department couldn't absorb a higher cost, it is right now. We've already hit them hard and the number, I believe, is something around $30,000. So it's just something that can't be absorbed. I like to see this in there. We're giving them something back anyways. And it's, again, if we had our own buses, the cost wouldn't be so significant, but we're dependent upon Bloom to do it. They're doing a great job, but it's really taking a beating on the athletic department. So I do ask the fellow committee members to support this measure.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. And I would just also add that I did ask the administration, because again, there are some, it's very limited, but there is some funding in the transportation revolving account. So I have asked the administration to just inquire, particularly with the high school, to see if there are any other groups that are in situations of a similar situation, similarly situated, such that the budget cuts are affecting their transportation capacity. So it may be the case that we examine some of those issues as well. But as Mr. Tyler says, we know, at least at the moment, that it is affecting the athletic department. Mr. Withers?
Why didn't the fee increases alleviate this problem?
The fee increases did alleviate the actual athletic budget in terms of what they need for supplies and whatnot. The change from having an internal fleet, again, if I'm stating this wrong, somebody jump in, but my understanding is that the change from having an internal fleet to, internal fleet to needing to use a vendor has put a greater than expected burden on the transportation lines in their athletic revolving account. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so just a motion to approve the use of the $7,500 for transportation revolving account for purposes of athletic transportation.
So moved.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, again, this a last issue that we wanted to make sure that was brought to the committee and the community's attention. And as I said when President Cook was here, I did have the opportunity to communicate this concern to Chief Hegney, and I appreciate his response and certainly his ongoing commitment to make sure that this issue is addressed in a thoughtful and aggressive manner. At the start of every school year, we have concerns over student safety at bus stops, and we want to make sure that while we by all means encourage parents, if you see issues and you have reason to be concerned about the safety of students getting on or getting off the bus, please, contact public safety officials and let them know if there are roads that we need to be concerned about. I did ask the administration to contact the police department with any particular areas that have been brought to their attention, either by our own staff or by the vendor, and I know that communication went today. And I think I would just ask the administration to continue to be vigilant with regard to making sure that we're on top of that issue, and make sure that we, one, encourage parents to communicate their concerns to public safety officials, and two, that we aggressively monitor those situations so we can communicate areas of concern as well. Mr. Furtado, anything I should add related to that? Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. And again, I do want to extend on behalf of the school community our gratitude to Chief Hegney and the Attleboro Police for being mindful of this and helping us to make sure that our students are kept safe. Okay, our final business agenda item tonight, we did have the committee did receive the memo from City Auditor Deb Gould related to the need for us to make a formal request of $60,000 so that can be appropriated by the city for use in the graphic communications department. This was essentially, there was some miscommunication as to the nature of funding that came in. We had viewed it originally as a donation. It's not a donation. I think actually be described as a rebate.
Actually, it is a donation, and
Okay.
we had originally, it was originally presented as a comprehensive leasing program from Canon
Right.
to outfit the digital, the graphics department that used to be headed by Mike Fontaine. As Dan came in, CTE made a decision to, a thoughtful one, to switch over to a digital environment, which is where students will be working when they leave that program. multiple vendors came in and gave proposals for doing that work. This one was selected based on the main piece of equipment being on state contract, and the supplementary equipment was to be defined and determined at a later date, but was part of the proposal. That morphed over time into something a little different, and ultimately Canon provided the remaining funds in the form of a donation, which by law has to go to the general fund in the city, which has now taken place. So since that's happened, we are obligated to make a formal request to the municipal council for those funds to be used as intended to continue and completely outfit the graphics department in CTE.
Thank you. So just a motion to make that request for $60,000. Again,
So
this
moved.
is, thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Furtado. All right, and that concludes our business agenda. We have 2 subcommittee reports tonight. And I will preface the policy subcommittee report when it comes up, which is not now. Mr. Larson.
The Finance Subcommittee met September 16th here in the Zito Conference Room, and my thanks to the chairman for helping me be in 2 places at the same time. Mr. Furtado reviewed with the committee the financial reports. So far, it's early in the school calendar, but it's always good to look at them. We had a discussion about year-end transfers that happened closing out last year. Mr. Furtado also gave the committee an update on the status of the MSBA program that's going forward. We reviewed with Mr. Furtado any budget concerns that are starting to develop. So far, things are looking on track. And then we also had a general discussion about the pay for substitute nurses when they need to be called in. And Mr. Furtado brought it to our attention that this is a number that needs to be reviewed from a competitive basis because we're having problems bringing qualified people in at the pay that we're currently offering them. So something that we'll be reviewing in the very near future.
Matter of minutes.
Matter of minutes. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. So a quick note before I turn it over to Mr. Withers for a robust policy subcommittee report is that procedurally, by policy, we table policies once they're introduced. Now, all of these policies have been mentioned in passing at the full committee level. They've been discussed at length at the policy subcommittee level. But as we will be meeting next week, I don't see any reason for us to suspend the rules to implement the policies immediately, with the exception of the substitute pay for the substitute pay waiver that we will discuss momentarily. Essentially, everything else that will be considered tonight, again, it has been thoroughly reviewed by the policy subcommittee report, but the appropriate procedural mechanism will be to table these policies in their entirety, and we will revisit them for final adoption consideration next week. So, thank you, Ms. Withers.
Thank you. As the chairman said, we had well, it wasn't too lengthy, but a busy meeting on September 21st in this conference room where we discussed some new policies, some changes to existing policies, and also outlined some things that we're going to be looking to do in the next several months before the end of the year. So I think now what I'll do is start to go through some of the policy changes that we endorsed, recommending to the full committee. You have copies of all these in your materials. The first being policy AD, which is the school district mission, vision, and beliefs. And the recommended changes to this policy really just aligns our mission with the current mission that we're going to be adopting, and our vision with the vision that we've discussed here numerous times. If anyone, I don't know if anyone has any questions. If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve policy AD as amended, or table it.
So moved.
Any discussion, questions? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving on to ADA, similar to AD really, or part of the same set of policies. This deals with the Attleboro Public Schools and the strategic plan and district goals. What this does that's different is that it provides the mandate, or excuse me, the requirement that the Attleboro Public Schools maintain a strategic plan. And it also sets forth what our new district goals are that we've talked about several times here. And it also mandates that at least every 5 years, a proposed strategic plan be presented to the school committee. So it proposes, continuing the dialogue that we've had and making sure that we continue to be a district that's goal-oriented with the strategic plan to lead us. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you want to add anything to that.
Very briefly, just that, the number of times in the past year that I've presented to various groups in each building and have had to explain or preface the strategic planning initiative and the process that's underway by saying that we're a district without one and have been without one for 15 years is stunning. And I don't know how that's possible. And I think that, it's good to have goals. I hope we keep them.
Mr. Storrs?
I just want to say it's so much cleaner with the changes that you're looking to have implemented. The policy's a lot cleaner. So great job.
All right, do I have a motion to table this policy?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next two policies, the chairman gave a quick preview of earlier when President Cook was here, have to do with the budget and our policies surrounding the budget. First, policy DB, which is a policy regarding the annual budget, just really cleans up the language a little bit and also incorporates the educational goals and objectives of the strategic plan. So it brings that directly into this policy. In policy DBC, which is public budget deadlines, we talked about this briefly before. It changes the policy so that by December 15th of each year, preceding the next fiscal year, the administration will present to the school committee their budget priorities for the coming year, so that the dialogue starts in mid-December rather than in March, to really get out to the public what the school district, school committee, school administration's goals and priorities are, and so that we can really start to prioritize those and also back those up in front of the community and get them on board with what we're trying to do.
Why was mid-December picked for the date? And I love the idea of getting the discussion going earlier. That's a very positive. The only reason I even question that it's mid-December is, every 2 years you have a committee that can be turning over, and early January is effectively the turnover. So you'd have you could have, partially or a majority of a full outgoing committee that's receiving that input. Not that it's necessarily negative, because I'm sure anybody that's going to be incoming would be interested to the discussion and probably be sitting in the audience listening in, but I'm just wondering if that was thought of at all.
We did talk about that actually at length, the fact that you also have elections going on every 2 years, which politicizes it a little bit, although by that point the election's over. But you're right, we have an outgoing committee and an incoming committee coming in. The thought being that we wanted to start it, as early as possible. We wanted the new committee to hit the ground running. We didn't know about the new committee coming in their first meeting, being budget related. That was a concern. And Chairman Murphy, if you had an additional comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was discussed in length, and I think it's a very valid point. What I would say is that, one, the strategic plan can't turn over every 2 years, and it's designed to be that way. And it's also designed to be a plan that emanated out of a broad discussion with a diverse array of stakeholders. It is certainly true that any new school committee has a right and to some degree a responsibility to determine their own priorities. However, I think each committee also has a responsibility to understand the context in which they're coming into office, and I don't think there's a better way to learn about and to understand the context in which you'll be serving than to see very early on the stark budgetary challenges that the district is facing. There may come a time where there never should come a time, actually, that there's no budgetary challenges, because it's a public entity and there's a responsibility there, a fiscal responsibility, and so if it's not quite as challenging at some point as it is now, then maybe there should be a modification to that timeline. But unfortunately, that time is a long way off. Number one, and number two, I think that we've talked a lot about the need for stability within the leadership ranks, and I think that's true at the school committee level. It's true at the central administration level. It's true at the building principal level. There's people get new jobs, they come and go. People win, lose, don't run. However, as a community and as an organization, we have to get to a point where we do prioritize stability if we're ever going to achieve any of these goals. And so I think that this, it certainly, it adds the pressure of context, but I think that in some ways that in and of itself is a best practice, because no school committee should come in and attempt to oversee or lead the district in a vacuum. Because I remember we talked about this during our orientation, that the one thing every school committee, every superintendent, every administrator has in common is that we are all temporary workers. There was a long history of the Attleboro school system before anyone comes into a position of leadership, and there'll be a long future, long after any of us have left. And I think that this policy contemplates that context in a way that I hope will allow thoughtful and deliberative leadership toward consensus-based goals, as opposed to leaders coming in, with an agenda, which this district and every other district has dealt with that challenge from time to time. So I think all of that is sort of incorporated into, and then also internally, it's sort of the earliest we can do it, which is sort of the simple reason behind December 15th.
And the other thing I would say too is, I mean, this is the first step in the first public step to the school committee in the annual budget discussions, and it doesn't expect decision making by the school committee at that point. It's a presentation by the administration, and it's really it's a continuum. It's a continuous discussion that's ongoing, and this is just the starting point for the next year.
Can I just DBC-E is the sort of elongated timeline contemplating the discussions between administrators and as the budget starts to build. That policy will have to be revised as well, and the administration will be presenting that to the policy subcommittee at their next meeting, and that I would expect amendments to that as well. But again, to Mr. Wither's point, 100% correct. There's a long process that will unfold subsequent to December 15th. But this is a fundamental change in the way the school budget is built. Pressing this issue, publicly discussing about the district's needs and educational priorities is a fundamental shift in the way we think about the budget, in the way that we build the budget, and frankly for the way that we advocate for the budget. So there should be no confusion as to the significance of the school committee taking this action. It is in my view, a significant step forward.
So can I have a motion to table? We're tabling this one, right? Table policy DB and DBC.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, we have school committee policy GBGCA. This is a policy that's amended. It's actually consolidating two prior policies regarding two separate child care programs we had in the district for some time, consolidating them into one that we'll call the Children's Center, serving children, students, as well as potentially children of school and city employees. And for this one, I'm going to ask Mr. Sawyer to speak to both the changes and the reasoning behind it.
Thank you. As I hope my memo was helpful in explaining. We have these two historical programs at the high school, and one that was called the teen parenting program and one that was the lab school, and that we are combining these to create the Children's Center, and by doing so, we will have greater flexibility in our staffing to make those programs, I think, run more efficiently and be more sustainable. This new Children's Center will serve the children of our employees, but the lab, the Children's Center itself will be the lab environment for our Chapter 74 program for early education and care. So we think this is both a benefit to our high school students and to our employees, and we think we'll do a better job of taking care of the little kids under our care.
Mr. Stewart?
That's no change than how it already is.
It's a little bit of a change because right now those are two separate well, not right now. Up until just now, they were two separate programs run by two different people, and they did not. We did not pool those resources.
But the CTE program
Yeah.
is happening in.
Yep.
Right. So.
But that program served 2 years, 9 months up to age 5.
Okay, so.
And the teen parenting program served, we'll say 6 weeks up to 2 years and 9 months. And now one program is going to have all of those
So
children.
the CTE will now be younger, 6 weeks and up, rather than
Yep.
the age. Okay, I understand.
I just have a question. We have two motions that are before us, and I had said there was no time sensitivity, with the exception of the substitute pay issue that we'll deal with in a moment. But I know that part of this is the approval by the school committee for the consolidation of the revolving account. Is there any reason that that vote can't take place next week? Go with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're only needing motion number 1 at this point.
I think we just table the whole thing.
Table.
We'll take it up again next
Alright.
week. Yeah.
All right. Can I have a motion to table the proposed policy changes?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're moving right along here. Next, we have,
That's why you keep the business agenda long. That way the subcommittee reports.
yeah. We have substitute pay policies, GCG and GCGE. These policies, we amended them to reflect current practices and needs with regard to both short-term and long-term substitutes, as well as school nurse substitutes. And as the chairman mentioned, I think we're going to be needing to approve this policy change, and then also requesting a immediate implementation with regards to a portion of the policy. So the idea is that the policy changes would go into effect July 1st of next year, with the exception of a couple changes that will take place immediately. So getting into the specifics of the two policy changes, with regards to policy GCG, we're making a differentiation between short-term substitute educators and long-term substitute educators. Long-term substitute educators essentially being those substitutes that you think of as coming in on a long-term sick leave or a maternity leave, where they're actually more in what you would think of as a teacher role. They're doing lesson planning, they're collaborating with other teachers and serving essentially as a teacher. Short-term being the traditional substitute model that you would think of, a 1 or 2 day illness. Is that correct, essentially?
Absolutely.
So to the actual policy, that's the change, is making that differentiation. And then the big meat of the changes come in the exhibit and what is the actual pay changes. And for short-term substitute teachers and paraprofessionals, we would be changing the per diem for certified to up to $100, non-certified to $85. And then for after 21 days in the same assignment, it would be up to $120. and then we have the differentiation for a long-term substitute teacher. That would be $210. And my understanding is this brings us in, in conformity with practices and being able to actually attract substitutes to those positions when we need them. Same thing with nurses, raise per diem of $110 so that we can actually attract substitute nurses on those days where we need them. And a similar raise to the substitute clerical staff. Anything that I missed? No.
Covered it.
So what I'd be looking for, would we need to suspend the rules on this?
For the immediate implementation, that would be the
Okay.
correct procedure.
So first I'll look for a motion to table the policy change, GCG and GCGE.
Actually, quick question on that.
Sure.
Since GCG-E is the one that we're looking to implement immediately, and it applies to GCG, don't we need to approve both?
Well, the
Because of the differentiation of,
the motion that we'll be seeking for the immediate implementation is just a specific directive to the administration to allow them to do this particular thing, in this case being to use the 21-day plus pay rate for individuals they know are going to be subbing on a long-term basis. The actual long-term substitute status will not actually go into effect until July 1st, 2016, when the revised policy becomes operative. And so the entire policy change and the pay schedule that goes along with it, with the accompanying policy, does not exist or is not implemented until July 1st, 2016. However, we have an issue right now where we currently cannot attract the pool of substitutes that we would like. And so the administration has asked for the authority to implement that component of it, which again is not even really the component as it will stand under the new policy, because the new policy will create a new designation of long-term substitute. If it was budgeted for, which there's no reason it should have been, but if it was budgeted for, we would probably be being asked to implement that part of it immediately. Currently it's not. And so the sort of happy medium is the revised 21-day plus rate of $120. And so it's just a specific directive to grant permission to the administration to utilize that pay rate for substitutes who would otherwise be designated as long-term substitutes if such a designation existed, and same thing with regard to the nurse substitutes.
so, quick question if I could. Because looking at the red line, it says right here, the after 21st day in same assignment, 120, which is what you were just talking about, that's not red, so that indicates that's current policy. Or is that incorrect?
That is
See it?
correct.
That is correct.
The change is that we don't have to wait for the 21st day.
For the known long-term situations,
Yes.
Jim.
Okay.
As opposed to waiting that 20 days and then going.
Okay, now I understand the change. Okay, now I understand what's being asked. Okay.
Which
So
is
from day one, they're getting that.
Instead of waiting the
yeah.
21st day, it's from day one. Got it. Thank you.
It's hard to get people to be here for 21 days at the current short-term rate, I think is
Got
the
it.
gist
Got
of
it.
the issue.
All right, so do we have a motion to table the policy?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Further
Aye.
discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now I think we'll need a motion to forego the rules.
A motion to suspend the rules. I'll make a motion to suspend the rules for purposes of immediate implementation as outlined in the revised version of what Mr. Withers is about to read.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Doesn't need to be, just
All
needs to be 2/3.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So what we're looking for now is a motion to instruct the administration to immediately compensate substitutes that they know will be in place for more than 21 days at the 21-day rate from day one. So that's $120 per diem from day one for a certified substitute and $85 for a non-certified substitute. And to also compensate substitute nurses at the per diem rate of $100 per day.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
I just want
Sure.
to clarify if I can. Per the exhibit, it says per diem is 100, and then after the 21st day in the same assignment, it's 120. So what we're approving is not what the policy is. Because what I'm hearing is that what we're approving from, instead of, right here it says after the 21st day, it goes to 120. But what we're saying is on day one, it's 120?
If
That
this,
second category below where it says 210,
Yes.
we're sort of creating that now at 120.
So the long-term substitute, we're creating
But
the
we
two.
know it's a long-term up front.
Okay.
Essentially,
So
right.
this has nothing to do with the 21st day assignment piece up
Right.
at the top.
Right.
This is about the 210 per diem and the 110 per diem for substitute nurses.
I mean, it's unrelated to the policy amendment. It's just a specific relief, which incidentally it didn't require the suspension of the rules since it's not an amendment to the policy. It's just a directive to the administration.
We'd like to be careful.
Yeah, always. That's the motto.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Now
All
I'm clear.
Further questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the last but not
Sorry,
least,
Mr. Chairman, before moving, I just want to make sure, because you had stated 100 for the nurses, and it was actually,
110.
no, 110.
I said 110.
you had that? All right.
The last policy, proposed policy change is policy to, or new policy, I should say, is policy JFB, which is a longstanding practice, putting it into the policy books where it should be. Allowing seniors who lose their residency after their summer after their junior year to continue to be enrolled at Attleboro High School for their senior year. I don't know if the administration wants to speak to this.
The fall of senior year is by far the most critical period in a student's life in our quest to prepare them for life after schooling. And I think we have great sympathy for the students who, for reasons outside of their control, are being asked to go to a different school rather than to complete with us. It has been historical that we have, worked with these students to keep them. This was less of an issue when both our policy was weaker and we were less vigilant in the enforcement of our residency policy. In the last few years, we have appropriately taken that on, and we've revised the policy, and that practice is now not in keeping with everything else we're doing. So we're asking to codify that practice because we do believe that at that stage in their educational careers, we shouldn't abandon them.
And just to follow up on that, Mr. Sawyer is right. I mean, when you think about career planning or college planning, the beginning of senior year is key, and having those professionals and teachers who know the students best is really important to help them get on the path that they want to. And counter to that, one thing that this policy does do is it keeps ultimate decision making in the hands of the superintendent to ensure that a situation where maybe someone's trying to take advantage of the system for purposes other than what the thought process is behind it, he or she would still hold the final say on making sure it was the purpose and thought behind the policy is being upheld. Mr. Storrs?
So in a situation where during the summer between the junior and the senior year, they move to another city, Foxborough.
It's a town. Sorry.
All right, you got me. All right, yes. So they moved to the town of Foxborough. I would assume that part of this would be that transportation, they are responsible for their own transportation. We don't need to put that in the policy because ultimate control is through the superintendent, correct?
And also, in fact, when it came into athletics, it also is approved by the MIAA because we've contacted them. As long as we have a policy that gives the superintendent school committee that opportunity to extend their education career here, MIAA is also fine with that.
It should also be noted that because these students would be included in our October 1st SIMS report to the state, they will have a positive impact on our foundation budget the following January.
Okay.
Can I have a motion to table the policy?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. And then we have a meeting currently scheduled for next Wednesday. I guess possibly maybe rescheduled depending on what happens with the full committee report, but if not, we'll be here next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, in which we'll discuss the budget timeline, administration composition, and a host of other issues as we wade our way through the policy book.
Thank you, Mr. Withers, and thank you to the members of the administration and to the school committee for your patience tonight. This was a lengthy, very substantive meeting. I think we were able to plow through a number of issues, and I appreciate everyone's patience and contributions. So with that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night. While everybody's sitting here, show of hands.
I was gonna ask you.
I'll come to open forum and just.
Oh my God. No, no.